Everyone, welcome to our Strategic Plan and Budget Public Input Committee meeting on November 29th, 2023. I'll now call on Regional Clerk Will Short to perform the roll call. Will.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig.
Present.
Councillor Deutschmann.
Present.
Councillor Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton. Chair Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hunink.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett. Councillor McCabe.
Present.
Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor Solonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Rabanovic. Councillor Williams.
Present.
And Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thanks, Chair.
I would like to acknowledge that on the land which we gathered today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinantam peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, before we begin, I'd like to note that we will take a quick break after the 18th delegation. We will now proceed with the delegations as listed on the agenda. I would like to remind all delegations of some of the guidelines for participation. For those who are joining us in person, please proceed to the podium. When you are called upon to speak, please press the button on the base of the microphone to turn it on. If the light is green, the microphone is on, you're good to go. Anyone who has registered before the deadline will have 5 minutes, and anyone who registered after the deadline will have 3. And folks, we have well over 35 delegations. We definitely want to hear from everyone and to be respectful of everyone's time. Those that have 5 minutes will have 5 minutes only, and I will ask at that time to conclude your comments. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in the immediate removal from the meeting, interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, and others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take any offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and shared ideas with us from our community members. So, with that, I'll call on Barbara Hankins and Rebecca Diederich. You have 5 minutes from the KW Players Association. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, and please no clapping from the audience.
I am Barbara Hankins, and I've been a member of the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony for 43 years, and I'm chair of the Players Association. The symphony was established in 1945 and was the largest employer of artists and cultural workers in Waterloo Region. Even though the KWS declared bankruptcy on September 21st, the musicians have not stopped performing and raising funds. We will continue to make music in the community and explore all options to save our organization and keep symphonic music alive in our region. Here are some examples of recent fundraising concerts. The KW Brass Quintet played on September 29th at a benefit concert sponsored by the Ontario Music Teachers Association. On November 1st, world-famous Emmanuel Axe donated his services for a sold-out concert with KWS musicians. St. Jacob's Mennonite Church hosted us for a concert on November 12th that included KWS members and singers from the community. On November 4th, the West Plains Concerts in Burlington sponsored a benefit concert of KWS musicians. And throughout the fall, St. John's Alora concert series has featured KWS musicians and raised funds for us. Since the announcement of bankruptcy, in addition to raising funds and presenting concerts, the Players Association has also been working with citizens who are dedicated to bringing back an orchestra to our community. You will hear from some of them tonight.
Hello, I am Rebecca Diederich, a musician of the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony. Right now, I and many of my colleagues are being hired on a freelance basis by other orchestras in Ontario, taking us out of our community and away from our families for long days at a time. It will be a terrible loss to our community if we lose our musicians to other places when we could be presenting inspiring concerts right here at home. In Waterloo Region, there are a number of excellent performance venues. However, the Center in the Square is a world-class concert hall where a symphony orchestra can really shine. In spite of the need to travel elsewhere for work, we have been doing everything we can to keep a strong community presence. With the region's help, we are confident that we will be able to continue the following activities: accompany local choirs, teach music to young people, coach and conduct ensembles, perform for schools, bring high-quality professional music to populations that can't get out to a concert hall, such as retirement and long-term care homes, community centers, perform for community noon-hour concert series, such as at First United Church, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, and the Kitchener Public Library. Provide music for special occasions, such as weddings. We also contribute to a vibrant downtown, bringing people from out of town and increasing business to restaurants and other establishments. As a key cultural institution, a symphony orchestra not only enriches the lives of residents of all ages, but also plays an important role in attracting talent and investment in other areas.
We are here today to let the Regional Council know that the KWS Players Association, with the help of many interested citizens, is actively rebuilding the KW Symphony. We ask for the region's support throughout this process. As our strategic and budget plans develop, we will be in contact with the region to continue discussions on how you can best help the symphony to move forward. Vibrant and versatile, a symphony orchestra will inspire generations of residents living in the community it proudly serves. The Waterloo region, with its rich cultural history, robust student population, cutting-edge tech sector, and world-class concert hall, simply must boast a professional symphony orchestra. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Councillor Hunick, question for, delegation, Rebecca and
Thank you, Chair.
Barbara. We've got a question from Councillor Hunick.
Given the money that KWS has rallied to raise among our community, I'm wondering how much money you would need from the region to continue going strong.
We don't have a set number right now. We are actively working on reorganizing and restructuring. We only ask that you understand that our story is not done, and we plan on moving forward, and we hope that you will support us as we do that.
Thank you for coming.
I'd like to call upon Victoria, the CEO of Humane Society of Kitchener-Waterloo and Stratford Perth. You've got 5 minutes. Good evening.
Thank you for having me here this evening, Chair Redmond and regional councillors. It's my pleasure to meet and connect with you as the new CEO, Day 13, of the Humane Society of Kitchener-Waterloo and Stratford Perth. I'm here to highlight for you a regionally critical project that we're undertaking. Next slide, please. For almost 100 years, our Humane Society has served many of our communities as a safe haven for homeless and abandoned pets. However, today we are far more than an animal shelter. We're a full social services organization providing over 40 programs and services to our regional communities. We have expanded to provide animal services to almost every municipality in the region. We operate as a core member of the region of Waterloo's public health, police, and community services. We provide curriculum-based education to tens of thousands of the region's youth. And as we continue providing affordable and accessible veterinary services to support people and pets, we have expanded our outreach services to provide thousands of vulnerable individuals and social service partners with free emergency pet food and supplies, resources, and veterinarian services. Through all of this, we've been relying on the fundraising generosity of the people throughout this region. However, now is the time for growth and investment in our Humane Society. We're out of space. We're running in a crisis mode. We have been growing alongside our municipalities, offering considerably more services to fill the gaps and needs. But our current facilities no longer support the increasing community need for our animal and outreach services. We have acted aggressively to meet these growing demands, helping thousands of people and pets, but is now critical to invest proactively in the future of the Humane Society and the services we provide to our communities. Next slide, please. So here's a picture of our new outreach center proposal that we will be building, and today we're here to ask the region of Waterloo for the very first time to help us build for the future. Our Humane Society will soon be expanding to create a full animal welfare campus at our Kitchener location, including the addition of 12,000 square feet of community outreach and education center, a mobile veterinary clinic, and the renovation of our existing companion animal clinic. Our communities are growing, and alongside them, the pet population is expanding, which creates significant demand for our services when people are experiencing crisis in their lives. Next slide, please. So consequently, we concentrated the impact of this project into 5 pillars, including a mobile veterinary unit, our pet food bank, better known as a pet pantry, a renovated animal hospital, our education programs, and the build-out of our physical capacity. As a result, this capital build is happening to work with intentionally upstream of many interconnected social issues that are impacting our communities, and it will serve to benefit about 50 to 60% of our population, many of whom are our friends, families, and neighbors that at any given time have a pet in their home. Next slide, please. Thank you. By supporting this project, you will be investing in the future public health, not just in terms of animal vaccinations, but also in the massive mental health benefits that pets provide. This impact is routinely felt by our partners throughout the region. You will also be investing in a future of animal-related services that is able to handle 923,000 people by 2050, including a future with affordable, friendly housing options and supports, allowing people to focus on their own health and well-being. And you will be investing in our future communities, making up kind and empathetic children and adults who care about not only animals, but people as well. Next slide, please. The project will cost $6 million, and the Humane Society is investing $2 million from our very own reserves to help make it a reality. We're asking the region of Waterloo for an investment of $500,000 allocated over a period of 3 to 5 years.
Victoria, I'm going to have to end it there. Do appreciate your time coming in. Thank you. I do have a question, actually, though, from Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation, and you certainly show the services and need. I'm curious, though, do you serve Cambridge? Because I know Cambridge has a Humane Society.
We do provide services in Cambridge. We do a lot of community outreach education. We do provide some animal services there as well, yes. They do have a Humane Society, but it is separately supported from the Kitchener-Waterloo, Stratford-Perth Humane Societies.
So basically more in the education and...
I don't know if I could call upon my wing lady, who is the former CEO, who is in her second last week of work. She's the guru for this proposal. So if I could just bring her in for 2 minutes, if council would permit that, it would be much appreciated.
Oh, we're gonna... come to the microphone, please, because the people that are tuning in from home can't hear you from there.
Thank you. All of our programs and services, with the exception of animal control, are provided to the residents of the city of Cambridge. So animal control is contracted to the Cambridge Humane Society, but all the charitable work that we do, our outreach work, our working with human shelters and providing wellnesses and medical treatment to pets in Cambridge is provided.
Okay, thank you very much. That's good to know.
Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris. In terms of your funding, is Stratford Perth contributing? Have you spoken with the province around some of this? I know they have legislation around animal rights, et cetera. Just confirm that. Thank you.
The province only provides funding for cruelty to animals. So it has nothing to do with humane societies or individual SPCAs.
Thank you. What about the education component?
We receive no funding from the province for any of the charitable programs and services that we offer.
Okay, and in terms of other municipal, Stratford, Perth, is the approach been asked there? Is
So
there
we
any
do
support
have
from there?
contracts with other municipalities, 13 in total. We are presenting to all municipalities because there will be an impact. For example, the veterinary clinic would be one that will go out into the rural areas of Perth County as well as Waterloo region. So we have made a request to them as well.
Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I appreciate what you're trying to do. Have you, just interested, have you approached Kitchener and Waterloo councils?
We have received a commitment from the City of Kitchener, and we're just continuing conversations with the City of Waterloo.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time. I'd like to invite up Hardy and Renee Wilms of Kitchener. You've got 5 minutes. They're appearing in person. Good evening.
Thank you. My name is Hardy Williams. I'm currently a resident of Kitchener, soon to move to Conestoga. 2 years in a row of plus 8% tax increases. This is just going to be crazy. All we hear is at every level of government now is the need for affordable housing. Housing costs are made up of 3 components. The costs are building, development fees, and property taxes. You are responsible for 2 of those. How can you say that you support affordable housing when you give Waterloo Region citizens sky-high property taxes and high development fees? You say you want affordable housing, but then your actions do the exact opposite. That's called sucking and blowing at the same time. For the past 25 years, I've been the treasurer of Waterloo Mennonite Homes, which is a nonprofit apartment on George Street, which deals with seniors. The average rent is about $900, but some people are subsidized down to $500. The problem is that the property taxes are $225 a month. So you can see that the math just doesn't work, and then you start adding 8% on top of that. My mother and father-in-law are a widow and widower living in small homes in Waterloo, and both of them have 15% of their income going just to property taxes. My wife and I just recently helped our son buy a small 880 square foot condo in Waterloo with taxes of $3,800 a year. Again, not sustainable. My wife and I were looking at a private sale of a property on Country Squire Road in Waterloo this past summer. The cost of this land was $900,000. In discussion with the builder and the landowner, we were told that development fees were going to be $102,000 on top of this. And that doesn't even include sewage. So you can see, we obviously didn't go ahead with crazy numbers like that. My business partner and I recently sold a 35,000 square foot warehouse on 4 acres of land in Paris. We set a record high for the highest amount per square foot received, even in this difficult time in Brant County. What all potential buyers from the GTA and Waterloo region couldn't believe is that our property taxes were only $36,000 on a building worth $7.5 million. The eventual buyer is a high-tech manufacturer from Cambridge, so Waterloo region lost a cutting-edge, high-tech company to Brant County, and a lot of that had to do with property taxes. While on that subject, why do you feel commercial properties should be taxed at 3 times the rate of residential properties? This isn't just a rhetorical question. This is something I'd really like to find out. Your CFO was recently quoted as saying that all the low-hanging fruit has been picked in regards to cutting expenses. He was actually saying that we can't cut anymore, so we're going to raise taxes. I can tell you that if I had a CAO and a CFO bring me 2 years of 8+%, they wouldn't be employed by me anymore. Why can't they find efficiencies?
Point of order, Chair Harris. Point of order.
Yes, Chair Redmond.
Do you want me to retract that?
Yes, I do. I think that's very unfair to criticize our professional staff. If you don't like what council's doing, we're here, we're big people. Don't take staff on. It
I
isn't fair.
apologize. I will retract that. Why can't efficiencies not be found on a $1.5 billion budget? It's done every day in the private sector. The scary thing is that AI is coming and is going to change everything, and we need the people in place to handle that. Hundreds and hundreds of condos are being built in Waterloo region where 6 or 8 or 10 old homes used to be. These homes paid $2,000 or $3,000 in taxes, but now you are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars, yet, and we still have an 8% tax increase. The Fraser Institute and 2 other institutes tell us that government workers in Canada make 25 to 35% more than the equivalent private sector employees doing the same job. This amount includes benefits. Why, if we've got all the low-hanging fruit, why not start freezing wages as the public sectors are being paid more than the private sectors who are paying the taxes? For 6 years, I was the chair of Parkwood Mennonite Homes, which is a long-term care facility located across the street from Rim Park. We are a nonprofit and try to pay employees the best we can without running a deficit. The problem is we run into every year employees coming back to us telling us that Sunnyside Home employees, what Sunnyside employees make, the wages the regions pay make it really tough for nonprofits homes in the region.
All right, thanks, Mr. Hardy, for your presentation. Your time is up tonight. So I'll call on Harold Drewitz, chairperson of the Kitchener Tax Watch Group. Harold, you've got 5 minutes. Welcome to council.
The tax hike of 7.65% for 2024. The only good item I read in this article was a quote from Waterloo Region's Chair, Karen Redmond. At the end of the day, there's only one taxpayer, and we all recognize that. After a decade of tax increases higher than the rate of inflation, I thought this year we might, just might, see another increase no higher than the rate of inflation. Unfortunately, this is not the case. One key word that has continually come up over the last few years is affordability. We are now reaching a critical point of unsustainability. Since 2020, the Consumer Price Index, or inflation, here in Ontario has gone up approximately 14 to 16% over the past 3 years. More alarming is the cost of food, groceries, which have gone up even more to approximately 25 to 27% during this time. In addition to this rise in inflation, the Bank of Canada key interest rate was as low as 0.5% in January and February 22, eventually rising to 5.0% on June 12, 2023, a tenfold increase. This is an increase the population has not seen since prior to the Great Recession of 2008. For the last 15 years, the younger generation has not seen interest rates this high, and I'm sure never thought they would ever see such a rapid increase in interest rates in their lifetime. I trust some of you remember the 1980s, the high inflation rate, the high interest rate, further, the high unemployment rate. It was President Reagan that came up with the term misery index, which is the addition of the inflation rate and the unemployment rate. It was these two factors that was considered to be detrimental to one's economic well-being. Their combined value is useful as an indicator of overall economic health. Recently, I just coined a new index, the squeeze index. This is the combined value of the inflation rate and the Bank of Canada's key interest rate. Current economic conditions affect the generations differently. While an increase in interest rate is more welcome for the senior generation, should they have investments or are homeowners, this does not offset the increase in food prices and other increases which are daily expenses. On the other hand, the younger generation has a double whammy challenge. They are starting their lives and families after high school, college, or university. Most wage and salary increases are only 1% of CPI. Another major cost is shelter costs. We all know rents are increasing at an alarming rate, and hundreds of billions of dollars of home mortgages for those that have been able to buy and get into the housing market have been coming due over the past year and will continue to come due in the next 4 years, increasing their existing interest rates payments by at least 4+% of the difference between the Bank of Canada rate from the previous several years to the current rate, further adding to affordability crisis. Waterloo Region food banks are experiencing unprecedented use, including more families. Very alarming, now even what I call working poor are going to the food bank. Families are having to make difficult choices. Do we buy food or heat our home? Many restaurants are seeing less customers. Family savings are being depleted due to increased costs. Students are having challenges finding affordable housing. On the corporate side, credit card interest rates are increasing, which people are using to finance their daily expenses, and so are bank loan losses. This leads to one difficult conclusion. The population is quickly reaching a point which, with potential tax increases coming in higher than CPI inflation, the ability to absorb these increases will no longer be sustainable. People are squeezed beyond their ability to manage these increased costs, even after having to make difficult choices. This council is not making it easier. For the last 10 years, your budget increase have been considerably higher than the rate of inflation. I cannot overstate that taxpayers' affordability concerns must be at the top of your and your staff's minds in approaching finalization of the 2024 budget and into the 2025 budget process. The goal is to analyze and implement adjustments to personnel resources and processes, utilizing improved methodology and technology to further increase efficiency and reduce or eliminate areas that are costly under current practices. Other jurisdictions might be investigated for models to assist in this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold. Appreciate your time tonight. We have no questions. I would ask Kathy Eckert of Kitchener to come to the podium. You have 5 minutes to speak. Kathy? No Kathy? Oh, we've got Kathy, sorry.
I'm just going to use my phone for my speech. Hi, my name is Kathy Eckert. This is my emotional support dog, Namaste. I'm just one of the recipients of your current rent top-off programs, Path to Home. I'm here to discuss your upcoming budget as to more money for rent and giving out money to help prevent evictions. Thank you. And my concerns about it. Please note, due to a bed bug situation in my building, not my unit, me being severely allergic to bed bugs, my doctor stated I should move since unfit for my habitation. And I am under threat and under duress from my life being threatened due to severe allergy to bed bugs. One, it's been hard listening to government at all levels support landlords over us, your clients, whether it be ODSP, OW, or Path to Home. As to landlords not having to rent to lower incomes. I have a question. Why is Pass to Homes paying my rent for me to be treated like a homeless person? That makes no sense to me. I am housed, so I should have a working stove to feed myself, access to laundry, heat to stay warm, and to be able to live without my right of reasonable enjoyment being interfered with by threats of eviction for asking for repairs and bed bug treatment while in your program by upholding the Residential Tenancy Act. I was told by Lutherwood, your agency don't anger the landlord to stay housed. My landlord's trying to force us to leave so my landlord can get units rented at current market value of $2,000 or more. If I have to leave, I become homeless again. My living conditions as of right now, and my friend and former roommate shelter can confirm this. I am living in a place that costs $1,315 a month rent. That is right now the equivalency of living in a homeless motel shelter. I have a crock pot, a microwave oven, and electric frying pan to cook off of. Same stuff I had at the KW motel shelter with my friend and former shelter roommate. One, yes, rent top-off is nice. It got me out of homelessness. But in just 3 years, my rent has fallen $900 short of market value. My building was sold, got a new landlord. Not only my life, but the other lives of the people in my building has been turned into a nightmare by our landlord trying to get us out so he can charge a higher rent. I know you want to give more money out to keep people housed, but having to watch region and provincial governments support landlords to help them turn a profit and help in discrimination towards people on assistance is not helping to stop the discrimination nor the evictions. You want to put more money in, but not put policies or proper supports or build regional housing or strongly advocate against high rent to stop discrimination against us, your clients, at no extra cost to the taxpayers is unfair. All I want is a landlord to provide me with a working stove and a place to live where I'm not living like a homeless, since this program was meant to prevent me from being homeless again. Try being harassed by a landlord, blackmailing us, extorting us, having to leave because my rent is $900 below the current market value. You say you'll give more money out is not helping stop evictions. Without rent control, it's turning my life into a living nightmare, and my mental health is at risk, and my mental health is not a reason to be stayed housed there. It is in danger. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kathy. We do have a question. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Ms. Eckert, thank you very much for coming in tonight to share your story. I think it's important for us to hear firsthand stories such as yours and what people are going through in the community as we work to focus what we can do on our end. I just wanted to say that maybe some of my friends in the crowd there can provide you with the contact information for Acorn and the Social Development Center to help you deal with the issue of your landlord who seems to be trying to evict you, and hopefully you can get some assistance from them to put that person in their place. So thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy, for coming tonight. Next up, I'd ask Melissa Bowman to come to the podium. Melissa, you've got 5 minutes. Good evening.
Good evening. Councillors often say that the main issue they hear about from residents is related to safe streets. Residents want drivers to slow down. They want traffic calming measures installed. They want to know they and their children can walk in their neighborhoods safe from harm. Fortunately, there are a number of proposals in the draft budget to help make that a reality. There are also some areas which we could improve. Let's start with the fact that slower streets are safer streets. Survival rates increase dramatically as speeds are lowered. Comfort is also improved. With that in mind, staff have proposed some important recommendations. First, they want to see school zones have consistent year-round speed limits. Staff state that benefits of this proposal include eliminating confusion about different speeds at different times, allowing schools to operate as community hubs even outside of regular school hours, and reducing speeds, leading to a safer and more comfortable walking environment, thereby encouraging more people to use active transportation, which is a key goal in the region's new strategic plan. Static speeds in school zones also align with our local municipalities, which improves consistency. Staff, following Council's push for a faster rollout of the automated speed enforcement program, have proposed to hire more staff and install cameras at 60 schools by the end of next year. Staff note that compliance to speed limits increases and is more consistent in areas with ASE. Given this program is to be revenue neutral and it results in slowing down our streets, this seems like a smart investment that I hope Council will support. I've heard some councillors call for a balanced approach to ASE and school zone speeds, saying that higher speeds outside of school hours provides that balance. I disagree. Our roads heavily favor those inside vehicles. However, consistent messaging and static speed limits enforced by ASE is a small step towards bringing more balance and safety to our streets. In addition to slower streets, it's important to provide options for people to move through the region without relying on a personal vehicle. Transit, of course, is an important way to do exactly that, and the region should be proud of the many investments it has made into our transit system in recent years. Because of improved transit, along with municipal investments in trails and cycling infrastructure, our household was able to sell our vehicle earlier this year and become car-free. In a time when affordability is on everyone's minds, being able to free ourselves from the high cost of car ownership has helped our household's budget immensely. By investing well in transit, we're providing residents with a solid alternative to the car, one that is more affordable and environmentally sustainable as well. And people are seeing that. We broke ridership records this year and are seeing high demand for transit in our region. This is the time to invest deeply in transit, to keep those riders and to continue to welcome more. And while I appreciate the proposed increase in daytime ION frequency, it must not come at the expense of reduced evening service. When our region needs a new road, we don't close down a different road in order to fund the development of the new one. So why would we do essentially that with our transit? One person on social media reminds us, part of the deal was that ION would be better than bus service along the Central Transit Corridor in KW. Let's not allow ION frequencies to ever drop below the bus service it replaced. In a similar vein, staff have proposed expanding the transit ad program. This is not something we consider with other public investments such as roads, libraries, or social housing. Why are we considering it for transit? Let us continue the important investments in transit and the LRT that have led to increased ridership and pride in our transit system. Please don't sell our showcase transit system to advertisers. One staff report referred to ads on the transit fleet as moving billboards, and I have to ask who wants to travel through the region in a giant ad? We should do what we can to keep our public realm free of advertising. If ad wraps must be pursued, I recommend wrapping the region's vehicle fleet in ads before expanding exterior ads on transit. There's much to like in the transit budget, including 2-hour transfers, the pilot of a corporate UPass program, the removal of a minimum load requirement, and improved snow clearing times for transit stops, though I'd like to see them shortened further. I don't have time to dig into it, but I'd be remiss to not mention my disappointment with the continued increases to our police budget, with so many organizations working on prevention and compassionate care are struggling or even closing their doors. Given that speed enforcement falls under police services, my hope is that we can reduce police costs as we expand ASE. Until then, it seems prudent to put a pause on the funds dedicated to hiring more police officers until they have at least caught up to this year's hiring goals. We could then use that surplus to refund the community. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Please, we'll refrain from clapping again, folks. I don't have any questions. I'd like to call upon David Alton, Lived Experience Coordinator, Social Development Center of Waterloo Region. And while he joins us at the podium, I would just like to remind those in attendance, while I appreciate the work perhaps on some signage, we do not allow signs in the chamber. You'll be asked to take it out of the council chamber. They can keep it for you until after the meeting. So just FYI, or you'll be asked to leave. So David, you're up. Good evening. You've got 5 minutes.
Blessed. Thank you, Chair and Council. So I've spent the past 2 years kind of acting as a bridge and bridging conversations between lived experts, advocates, and municipal staff. And I just want to share tonight some important themes I want you to consider as you grapple with the housing budget, the homelessness budget, and all the related stuff tied to community services. The first main kind of theme, and it's not a fun pill to swallow, but it's kind of an obvious one, is that bigger action is needed. In the sense that you've seen people in the community, November comes every year. Every year we have this moment of crisis. People are making their voices heard, both through formal agency avenues, through formal advocacy avenues, but also in direct actions such as encampments. Something that outreach workers are very concerned about this year is that we are dealing with an unsheltered population that is less experienced than ever before when it comes to surviving this winter. We also know that several weeks ago we passed our shelter capacity limits. And as Kathy was illustrating earlier, right now all our focus is on chronic homelessness, but we really need to expand the conversation on what is adequate housing. Someone living with an abusive partner, that's not adequate housing. 10 people in a 2-bedroom apartment is not adequate housing. People with bed bugs and not working appliances, that's not adequate housing. So the scale of this crisis is immense. And you are very aware of this. The federal government has been very clear in its lack of funding for housing for decades. The province has downloaded so much responsibility onto municipalities. And you are also very aware of the decades of stigma and under-resourcing that make your roles very challenging. But as I like to say in the Plan to End Chronic Homelessness prototyping process, that bigness is our friend. The scale of this issue is so much bigger than us, but also so is the emerging movement to make housing a human right, to make sure that everyone in our community has a safe place to live. We just need to leverage our tools and resources to meet that moment. And so I'm not an expert at what tools and resources you have, but I think naming that, whether it's something like an emergency, a crisis, we do need to treat housing as the scale of urgency that it deserves. And so I would say expect more asks from the community, from staff, and from agency partners for funding, because there's just so much need in our community. And do your part to make the region available to move those forward. I mean, when it comes to addressing the gaps from the federal and provincial government, I would say this. When it comes to advocacy, you have tons of experts on advocacy in the community. Lean into them, learn from them, partner with them. The Unsheltered campaign created an amazing graphic on their website right now that's all about how do we address stigma with homelessness. Those tools can help us make the signal to the community that this crisis is the crisis that we need to deal with. Similarly, stigma. There is deep stigma in this community, and I'm sure you're familiar with it because it shows up in your phone banks, your emails, and your messengers, just how many people in the community are concerned, are confused, are afraid, are ignorant, and we need to provide those people with a response. I will say that Infrastructure Canada just did a study of encampments across municipalities and across the country, and they found that municipalities are consistently prioritizing the concerns of neighbors over the health and safety of encampment residents. So how do you address that? Well, the City of North Bay just reallocated $150,000 out of their police budget, and $11,000 of that they used to create a really stellar public relations campaign to address the stigma towards homeless people. Similarly, Calgary has funded an agency to create a dispatch program where they have six vans and 4 operators to divert calls from 211, from 911, and from bylaw, so that people who are trained to deal with those situations are going to provide people the care they need. And most importantly, I just ask you to embrace the spirit of flexibility. We are trying to create a human rights approach in this region, and it is hard work. And the barriers to that come when we don't we aren't tasking the many different silos within our municipalities to work together and come to the table. So please grant all the departments within the region to work together, to come to the table, to work with community services, to work with agencies, to work with community partners. And give them the grace, the flexibility, and the resources to be creative. Because solutions are emerging every day, and we just need your help to make sure those are properly funded, have the ability to move forward to the next step so that we can meet the moment that we're in. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, for that. Councillor Deutschman.
David, thanks for coming in today, and hopefully you can give Ms. Eckert a hand with respect to that thing I was talking about. But the question I have is this. I hear what you're saying, the advocacy and all of that, and we're looking at all of that, and we're working on the plan to end chronic homelessness, which has many factors and many parties at the table to try and put something together. But what I'm wondering about is this. As we're heading into the winter, and we had a really cold night last night and some cold days, what would you want to see the region do immediately, in the short term right now, to assist people in the community?
I will say the other day, I was in a meeting full of wonderful, caring agencies who are trying their hardest to brainstorm solutions for the winter. And something that came up was that the Kitchener Fire Department recommended that it is far safer to heat a large congregate space than it is individual tents. And so there wasn't the ability, the people in the room didn't have the ability to push that to the next level, but regional council does have the ability to activate, whether it's large tents, large indoor spaces, heat those spaces. That way, the fire department is able to be a partner with the community agencies and community organizers who are trying to keep people safe this winter.
So that'd be something like we see at Oktoberfest at the Concordia Club, in a big tent like that.
Yeah, that would be a place to start the conversation, because right now the fire department and community services and agencies are not all at the same table. This idea is floating around them, but they don't have the green light to move that further, and that's something that only can come from your table.
Okay, thank you, David, for coming in.
Thanks, David. I'll call upon Sarah, homelessness and house justice worker, and Jason, program director, community justice initiatives. You collectively have 5 minutes to speak, so good evening.
Good evening, Chair, Regional Councilors. My name is Jason Spencer. I'm the Program Director for the Justice Center at Community Justice Initiatives. And I'm here today with my Homelessness and Housing Justice Navigator, Sarah Escobar. We'd like to speak to you a little bit about the Justice Center and the intersection between our work around homelessness and housing and the region's responsibilities and accountability pertaining to housing policy, affordability, and the homelessness issue, as well as the immediate needs in our community and how the region can address them. The Justice Center and its work is rooted in restorative practices. So what we look at doing is engaging the community to be in conversation, to be in dialogue with one another in order to find solutions to the harms and needs that are happening. One of our focus areas is homelessness and housing. As part of this focus area, we've established an informal network for new and experienced outreach and direct support workers, providing mentorship and creating a space for collaboration and healing. Our homelessness and housing justice navigators involved in multiple conversations across the region, including collaborating with the Lived Expertise Table, as well as co-creating for the plan to end chronic homelessness. The relationships built in involvement with frontline and direct service support workers, as well as hearing conversations at multiple tables, provides the Justice Center with a clear understanding of the consequences of the erosion of our social safety nets that have occurred over the years in our region.
Through you, Chair. Each level of government has their own areas of responsibilities and accountability as it relates to housing policy, affordability, and homelessness. We'll focus on the region's accountabilities. So as far as the accountabilities go, the region ensures local planning aligns with broader housing policies, allocating resources to support affordable housing projects, collaborating with community organizations to address homelessness. There are conversations being had about the unsheltered community, the folks myself and colleagues love and support daily. These conversations are finally acknowledging the connections homelessness has with addictions, mental health issues, and acquiring brain injuries, and many others. In a way, workers have been asking to be heard, acknowledged and addressed by the region for years. The situation now, compounded with the finalization of housing, record amounts of evictions, and an affordability crisis that has no end in sight, leaves the current financial commitment from the region falling short when considering the urgent life-sustaining needs of the unsheltered community. All of our emergency shelters and sanctioned encampments are full. Yet the Plan to End Chronic Homelessness report states that 412 individuals are still sleeping rough. Folks, whether staying in unsanctioned encampments or elsewhere, face displacement or a lack of services needed to support their well-being and are in immediate need of supports to sustain life this winter, beginning with simple shelter. And this only represents the visible experience of homelessness. Food banks across the region are reporting record numbers of people accessing their services, including many people who are employed. Rental amounts have increased 141%, according to Vital Signs report, since 2005, with 37% of renters living in unaffordable housing. Ontario work rates have not increased over the last 5 years, while ODSP rates have increased slightly, and the minimum wage is well below the living wage for our region. People are vulnerable and potentially at risk of homelessness. The number of people needing services is growing every day. Our frontline and direct support workers are connecting and loving members of our shelter community every day, yet they need resources and help to be able to do their job effectively, in addition to having real options, solutions to provide to the folks that they're supporting and connecting every day. We need a unified and collaborative response to this situation led by the region, bringing in emergency measures to create space for people to shelter, support the construction of sandbag houses. It's fire resistant and insulating, and it's an idea that's come directly from our community on regional lands. Ensure people have a warm and dry place where they can escape the elements, give cash infusion to those experiencing homelessness. The second piece, infusion of funds for frontline workers and direct support workers. Support and fund training and standards for direct support workers. Provide EAP and other supports in form of debriefs and self-care to acknowledge the difficult nature of the work.
Thank you both for coming tonight. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Jason and Sarah, for coming in tonight to speak. Appreciate that. But Sarah, did you say sandbag housing? And you said that's a local initiative. Can you explain that a little more, please?
It is. It's one of the ideas that has come out directly from our community members. It's one of these ideas. It's part of the conversation that we want to figure out how to have when folks from our community, we're wanting folks to be included and we're wanting folks to share their thoughts and their experiences, and we want to learn from their knowledge. But when they do, they run in opposition of the policies that we've already have in place and are created. And so the conversation really needs to be, how can we actually bring those ideas in? And then we need to flex, and we need to figure out how to actually adjust so that those ideas can come to life. It gets really exhausting for the community when we go to them and we ask them for feedback, and then we come back with, yes, but we can only do 1, 3, and 4, and it's gonna have to cost half the amount of money, and it's gonna need to take half the time. And this sandbag idea has come from somebody in our community. It's well planned. The person has the supplies, they're ready to move, they have volunteers. Part of what the conversation needs to happen now is we need to sit down with policymakers and decision makers and figure out what it is that we need to do so that some of the safety concerns and whatever other concerns are coming up, because this is where we are learning. This is where we need to breach that gap, like David was speaking of being able to, you guys share with us what you need from us so that we can actually make these ideas come to fruition. So yeah, this idea is from somebody here.
Okay, so first off, I want to thank everyone that's telling me I'm coming in very loud, so sometimes when you're at home, you're not sure how that comes across, so my apologies to everyone in the room for screeching in their ears. Sarah, thank you very much. I think I'll with you on some of that and some other discussions, so thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Deutschman. Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris. Thanks for coming in today. Just have a question and clarification. So with the work that you're doing in working with families and children, you working with youth in homelessness, and what are you seeing from that demographic specifically?
So we're not direct support workers. We're supporting the workers. I do go out to the community, and I've done street outreach for the last 25 years in this region. the population has just grown. The complexities are real, and the complexities aren't single. And so combinations of complexities and illnesses, and especially with histories, complicated histories that the youth are coming from home, it's growing, and it's all going to grow. And I mean, that's the biggest thing. The region itself, we saw that that graph that was shared a few weeks ago, where the gap between homes available and folks experiencing homelessness is just going to continue to grow. Youth, we shouldn't discount youth out of that group. That group will include youth as well, and seniors and fixed incomes and new Canadians, and yeah.
Councillor McCabe has a question.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thanks for coming in and sharing this information. I just a question. I'm curious if you've dived into the plan to end homelessness, and if you have provided some your feedback on that. And the other thing I'm wondering is if you, like we've just sat through a number of hours of budget discussions, where one of the numbers that kind of keeps coming back over and over to us is that our region currently is estimating that we pay approximately $170 million from our property tax system that goes into things, particularly housing and homelessness, that are things that really should be paid for by the provincial government. And so I just wanted to ensure that I'm wondering if you are aware of that number. I mean, right now, that the budget increase right now is estimated at 8%. It's about 4.7% of that. 8% is actually taken up by the initiatives that our staff have proposed to try and get our arms around and deal with the housing and homelessness challenge. So I didn't know if you were aware of those numbers, but just wanted to, I don't know if you're aware of those numbers, but wanted to make sure that to share those with you.
Can I respond? Yeah, aware of the numbers we are. And quite honestly, that's where the conversation really grows, because then we really need to look at systemically what we've created and why is it that we need to collect our tax dollars to be able to provide life-sustaining measures and programs for folks who are most vulnerable of our community. I think that does fall into our responsibilities as a community. And so I think part of the thinking we need to do is come up with long-term sustainable ways to finance these life-sustaining programs so that we don't have to scramble every year to try to figure something out.
Well, thank you both. I'd like to invite Kevin up Batelier, Herbs Road Shelter. You've got 5 minutes, Kevin.
Hi there, my name's Kevin. I've spent the last 3 years homeless. When COVID hit, I ended up getting laid off and then eventually losing my home. I've also become a drug addict since then. First started with meth, and then after that, I lost my mother and became a fentanyl addict. Herbs Road Shelter has helped me. I've now been clean for 2.5 months. I feel it's really important that I know there's talk about a Cambridge one as well opening, that the go-ahead goes for that, so others like me can have a chance at surviving. Because honestly, if I had to stay in a tent for another winter, I wasn't planning on surviving it. That's all I can say right now. Sorry.
Well, thanks, Kevin, tonight for coming in and speaking with Regional Council. Appreciate that. Councillor Foxton has perhaps. Oh, I've got Councillor Hunick. So, Kevin, we do maybe have a comment or a question. I don't know if you want to come back, if you don't mind, Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Kevin, I just wanted to say thank you so much for vulnerably sharing your story with us tonight.
Thank you.
Councillor Foxon?
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, my e-scribe without putting my hand up doesn't seem to be working. Kevin, well done. I'm proud of you. I can't believe what you've gone through and how well you've done. I'm really proud of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin. Jane Willoughby.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
My e-scribe
Okay.
is not.
Councillor.
I too want to, Kevin, thank you for.
Kevin's going to get a workout tonight.
Did we tell you you also get exercise here?
Yes, apparently.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for making yourself vulnerable, for being honest. And it helps us to know that what we're trying to accomplish has results. So thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you.
Jane Willoughby, bet you up. Jane, thanks so much for coming. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. We are homeowners who have been living on Sterling Avenue South across from Cameron Heights for 22 years. We also have 2 children attending Cameron Heights. I'm sorry. Previously at the facility, the residents on Sterling Avenue South received a letter dated November 14th from the region of Waterloo stating the homeless shelter at Edith McIntosh Daycare at Cameron Heights Collegiate would reopen on November 30th. Previously at the facility, there were unprecedented disturbances involving mentally ill, homeless, substance-addicted individuals. The situation created significant emotional and psychological stress for students and residents living in the area. Putting this facility on the same property of a high school is abundantly imprudent, if not absurd. It is hard to imagine how centrally locating this facility in a school and residential zone could be to anyone's advantage. The location of this facility will significantly impact students and local residents, like we've learned in the past. Potential for concerns for the facility are diminished property values, safety issues, youth role model perceptions, property damage issues, and peace of mind. These concerns should have been acknowledged and discussed with local residents prior to implementation of this plan. But just like June 2022, we are ignored. The facility received a lot of blowback the last time it operated. Not only can one predict the ensuing calamity, but we've lived through this before. This should be a lesson well learned. Instead, it's Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. As stated in the letter from the region, the property was previously used as an emergency shelter in the summer of 2022 until King Street Shelter was opened. Heinous, disorderly, antisocial activity at that site created a living hell for surrounding residents, students, and staff. Our days and nights were filled with sirens of ambulances, fire trucks, police. There were break-ins and theft, overdoses and death. Garbage, drugs, syringes, and human feces from the shelter residents were present all around our school properties, the field, Kaufman Park, sidewalks, front lawns of our homes, and the Iron Horse Trail behind our homes. The students had to do needle sweeps before they played on their field. When the shelter closed in September, all these problems magically disappeared. SHIP has also claimed the shelter at 84 Frederick Street has operated without incident over the last year. This is an unfair comparison. Frederick Street is for women, trans women, families with children. Edith McIntosh is for 30 to 35 men, where the admission criteria, as per SHIP's website, is to have a primary diagnosis of mental illness, and the comparison is truly deceptive. This shelter enforces a no substance use policy on site, a policy that will push them into the immediate surrounding community that consists of school grounds, residential homes, a park, the Iron Horse Trail, to satiate their addictions. How does this no-use policy benefit the community as a whole when the facility residents have no choice but to use the adjacent areas previously mentioned? How is the opening justified when we look at the history of the incidents involved in the shelter in 22? Even though the region is trying to sell us on the mitigated changes stated in their letter through SHIP, this is not enough. It's unbelievable that we would be told it is a no-use site on one hand, and then be told there will be an increase of needle sweeps on the other. Are you coming over to our front lawns, the Iron Horse Trail, behind our homes, the school field, or Kaufman Park? And how are these needles going to be found in the snow? Or do we have to bird dog it like last time? So for the well-being of 30 to 35 men with mental health issues, there will be 1,787 students at Cameron Heights at risk every school day, not to mention staff and surrounding homes and families. It is ludicrous that in the past few months, our property taxes have been raised, whereas at the same time, it's decided to place a shelter in the area, ultimately devaluing our properties. Mark my words, the Band-Aid fix will not be effective. I absolutely understand there's an unprecedented homelessness in Waterloo Region and Canada, and with an average of 40,416 new Canadians coming on an average every month
Jane,
in 24 and 26.
Jane, we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Appreciate you coming in. I will ask, there is a question actually from Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, Ms. Willoughby, first off, thank you very much for coming in this evening. I, like my other fellow regional councillors, especially those from Kitchener, very much appreciate the concerns that are raised by the neighbors and the people in the general vicinity of these facilities. Because as I'm finding with my work with the neighbors at the King Street shelter, we have to find a spot for respectful coexistence. So I just wanted to let you know that as this develops, feel free to reach out to me. I will be happy to come out to visit, to see what's happening. And I'm sure Commissioner Sweeney as well, who is well aware of the issues and the concerns. We're working continuously to try to improve what we can do to allow these facilities to fit in the neighborhood and coexist in the neighborhood. This is a difficult situation for all of us. It's an emergency situation for all of us, but please feel free to reach out to me at any time this process.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We have been ignored, completely ignored. No return phone calls.
Thank you, Jane.
I'd also like to say that there's no other homeless shelter that is 500 feet from a high school.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate that. Mark Eagers, president of the Waterloo Region Police Association, is up next. He is going to join us virtually. Mark, you've got 5 minutes. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair Harris. I don't think it's letting me turn on my camera. Oh, here we go.
Carry on. You're good, Mark.
We're good?
Yep.
All right. Stand by here. Thank you, Chair Harrison, and thank you for having me today. The Waterloo Regional Police Association is the elected and unifying voice of the over 1,100 sworn and civilian police personnel who proudly dedicate their lives to serving all communities within the Waterloo region. I'm honored to serve as president and advocate on behalf of those members. And just for a bit of context, I'm a police officer proudly serving our region for 24 years and have the rank of sergeant. As the 2024 budget is debated, I would ask that you please keep this presentation at the forefront. The region is expanding twofold, urban and rural, and both have their unique complexities. Urban expansion and the increased calls related to that expansion is soaring, and the challenges of these calls, I'm sure, is not lost on anyone on regional council. Rural growth is also occurring at a rapid pace. However, members are still servicing these areas with the same number of resources as was allocated in the 1980s. That's more than 40 years ago. Our rural community members have made it clear they want more resources allocated to public safety, not less. In the last municipal election, it was one of the main issues, and every candidate who supported enhancing the police presence in these growing parts of the region were elected. To paint a clear picture, Stats Canada reported that in 2021, Waterloo region experienced its highest total crime and severe crime rates in 5 years. Our violent crime severity index also rose by 2%. To be frank, there is simply not enough uniformed officers to respond to calls for service due to staffing pressures. This undermines safety and our community member faith that the police will arrive in a timely fashion when they need them. Our community also expects our members to monitor and enforce road safety, but with the current funding allocation, WRPS's staffing levels are so low that proactive traffic enforcement is, for the most part, an incredible challenge. This again further erodes the public's confidence in the police and makes them worried about safety of our community. Often overlooked are the 911 communicator personnel working tireless behind the scenes. They are also understaffed. They not only manage calls from the public, often at their worst times, but they also have to manage complaints from our community when officers are simply unable to respond quickly enough. They are a lifeline to officers on the road, to community members calling in for assistance, and when our communication branch is understaffed, it compromises both officer and community safety. An important indicator for our members' workload is case clearance figures. In 2021, Waterloo Region had the highest number of reported criminal code incidents per officer among upper tier governments. The case clearance rate for 2022 was 37% for WRPS. The declines in this rate over the years have been attributed to resource challenges in the Investigative Services Division, as well as workload demand per officer, which again highlights the greater risk to our members and our communities. In 2022, Waterloo Region had 128 officers per 100,000 people. This figure has consistently been on a steep downward trend since 2013, when the figure was 144 officers per 100,000 people. This comes at a time when the region's population has increased significantly. In very clear terms, this cannot continue, especially if we want our members to perform at their best, remain healthy, and stay on the job to protect and serve our communities. Quite frankly, we're in a crisis and desperately need more human resources. This crisis did not occur overnight. It is the outcome of years of chronic under-resourcing and a failure to prioritize police funding, for which we are now feeling the effects. It's been exacerbated by a highly competitive labor market and the challenges that it brings with recruiting and retaining the best members. A challenge is by no means limited to the WRPS, but is happening across a variety of industries. Members regularly step up and fill these gaps through overtime, but that's not both financially or through a lens of member wellness, which sees our members suffering from burnout. There is no shortage of critics when it comes to policing, particularly when budgets are debated. However, most of those voices have never had to knock on a door without knowing what lays on the other side, approached a vehicle without knowing who is behind the wheel. In fact, most of those critics have never had to sit on the other end of a phone, helping someone through their worst moments, trying to reassure them that help is on the way. Most of those critics simply cannot comprehend the challenges and dangers that our members face each and every day. The recent murders of 5 officers over the past year is a tragic reminder of the uncertainty and of those dangers.
Mark, I'll have to get you to end it there, but we do have a question from Councillor Deutschman. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Sergeant Eagers, for coming in tonight, and also I thank you for your service with Waterloo Regional Police. No one on this council is talking about reducing the number of police in our force. I just want to point out, though, over the past 2 years, we've had the largest approved increase of officers, 35 and 19, for a total of 54 officers. And over the past 2 years, we've only been able to add a net additional 6 officers per year for 12, which leaves us with a complement deficit of 23 officers. And so, Sergeant Eagers, why should we add 18 additional on top of the 23 or 25 after this quarter is done? Why don't we just hire what we've already approved and then add more as we go. We're only adding 6 on average when you factor in resignations, retirements, OPP transfers.
Well, sir, what has happened is actually the councils of the past, certainly not this council, but because there has been no allocation over the years of proper staffing, that the baby boomers are retiring. Quite frankly, because we've always had these peaks and valleys of staffing instead of sustainable staffing every year, which is needed. And that's what we're asking. We're so far behind the rest of the province right now that, quite frankly, if we're losing members, it's because of their workload, because they're going call to call for 12 hours a day, which is unsustainable. And as far as I don't challenge this council, but I certainly ask this council and the Police Services Board in the future for sustainable staffing increases that matches what our region is going through.
Right, but I just want to, again, we're happy to hire all that we can, but the reality is, as you know, aren't we competing with other forces across the province? I saw Timmins, for example, is offering a $30,000 signing bonus for officers. So we're competing all across, and the colleges can only produce so many. And so, like I said, you haven't addressed the issue of the fact that we have a deficit of 23, probably 25 officers going into next year, which covers the whole 18 that you're asking for.
Yeah, Councillor Doyson, I'd appreciate.
That's a question, Chair Harris.
Well, if you can ask a question, because it's not debate time, it's question time, so.
That's a question. I asked him. He hasn't dealt with that.
We've been working very diligently, the association and the service have been working together to attract and keep our members where we are. And when we've even gone to the foresight of not going against our collective agreement, but we're thinking outside the box, because we are competing. We're competing with different industries. We're competing with other police services. But we're also trying to attract other police officers from other services. I have complete confidence in Chief Crowell and his staff that we will be able to fill those positions.
Well, maybe you could send me your contact information and we can have a conversation in the next week or so.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eagers, for your time. I'd like to call up Gina from Kitchener. She's appearing in person. Gina, welcome.
Good afternoon, or good evening, I guess. I'm not an expert in homelessness, but I do know it's a national problem that cannot be, nor should be, solely funded by the region alone. I agree with Councillor Craig's previous comments that all 3 levels of government should be contributing to funding and finding solutions to this problem, as it's overwhelming, and the strain that is putting on taxpayers is not sustainable. We understand there are many reasons why someone is homeless and that there are no quick fixes. Would it be helpful and more effective to group people based on similar needs and provide them the help that they need to move on and out of the system so taxpayers are not continuously funding the same person? The multi-million-dollar price tag proposed by Peter Sweeney had no firm proposed plan, which I saw little details on any long-term solutions, only perpetual funding increases. It seems to me we need to reevaluate the funding services where we can see a visible result, like examples presented by the Better 10 City successes. In reality, there are people that do not and will not have the ability to live on their own, and those who refuse treatment. A permanent facility should be considered for those individuals where they are fully supervised and receive the supports they require. As Peter Sweeney mentioned, 1 out of 4 people are classified as having trimorbidity, meaning they are chronically homeless, have physical or mental health issues, and have addictions. If I understand how this works, when you're homeless, everyone is sharing the same place. Is this healthy or even fair for those who are temporarily unhoused through rent evictions, immigration, or job loss? The budget should support temporary subsidies to prevent people from becoming homeless. We need to make changes, and I strongly encourage the implementation of inclusionary zoning on all new builds to help people in our community access affordable housing. Considering the King Street East Emergency Shelters contract is ending later this year, I ask you to consider the following for new locations. A set criteria for distance, such as 2 kilometers away from vulnerable persons like schools, senior homes, or daycares. A neighborhood engagement prior and regularly after the shelter has been opened. Contacts where residents can reach out and raise concerns and have them effectively addressed. A hired security firm, if required, that is trained with mentally ill and substance abuse, or maybe we just need more outreach workers. The agency hired to run the shelter has a code of conduct that must be followed by all residents, along with a transition plan to move residents through the system. And lastly, ideally, a long-term location where residents do not have to stress about where they will stay or where they will have to relocate. It is necessary to get this right. The amount of documented incidents from King Street East shelter residents, the police were called to the King Street shelter 330 times between January 1st to June 30th of this year. If we do this right, we can eventually reduce the reliance on emergency services and the police. I also believe that the budget should contain a contingency fund, if above fails, for surrounding residents to claim expenses such as property damage and or installation of security cameras. I mentioned this from lived experience from the shelter on King Street, where we were provided a couple days' notice and no one was prepared what was about to happen. We've encountered countless thefts, strangers sitting or sleeping in our backyards, property damages, and one example was costed $10,000 out of pocket, and some have been surprised by strangers showing up in their basements while they were at home. We have had little support from the region who originally made this decision. We no longer feel safe in our homes, and I don't want to repeat this in a new location. Thank you for listening, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Gina. I don't have any questions from my colleagues, so I appreciate your time tonight. Nicholas from Kitchener, Abogi. You've got 5 minutes. Good evening.
Thank you. My name is Nicholas Abwaje. I'm a 20-year-old student at the University of Waterloo and born and raised in Kitchener, Ontario, and a proud resident of the region of Waterloo. I've lived here all my life, and I'm here today because I'd like to advocate in favor of more funding towards our transit systems, as well as speak in favor of the motion that is being brought forward towards council relating to 10-minute at-peak headways all year, effective June 2024, and to maintain the current service levels comprising 15-minute shoulder period headway all year. I would like to talk about the importance of public transit in my life and in people in the region's life in general. The Waterloo region is an example when it comes to public transit for many regions to follow, whether it become our GRT and the ION as well, and we need to fund it more. We've seen record ridership, and I've experienced that firsthand. When I'm commuting from Kitchener to my school, the University of Waterloo, I'm taking the 201 every day, and oftentimes people are being left behind on these buses. There's cramp. It's very cramped for people. People aren't able to sit down, especially for those people who may, it might be much more comfortable for them to sit down. But I've taken great pride in the fact that no matter the time of the day, for the most part, you can rely on our system during the summer. I lived in Ottawa, and I saw how disastrous the transit system was there in not prioritizing the reliability for constituents, for people living there. You can never know when you are going to be able to go somewhere, when the bus is going to come, when the train, if the train even comes at all. I would like to reiterate that our GRT system has seen a massive increase in ridership this past year, with over 150,000 boardings a day and 20,000 of those being the ION. And I'm not too familiar with how the ION ridership is being tracked, but if it's just being based off tap-ins, a lot of students don't tap. So I assume it's much, much higher than that. The effects of decreasing service after 8 p.m. To 30 minutes, up to 30 minutes, would disproportionately impact young people and people who don't typically work 9 to 5 hours, as well as people who just want to do a family outing, people who want to do something at nighttime. These are all different types of people in our region who want to take alternative forms of transportation rather than just having to take a car. By having worse service times in the late evening, we're hurting a lot of people in this region, myself included. I have a few concerns with the implications of 30 minutes service, or up to 30 minutes, and to 20 minutes even, after 8 p.m., mainly relating to a few key issues. For example, our region's commitment to climate change and addressing climate and the climate crisis. Having people opt towards public transit is the best thing to do for our climate, as it means less people using less sustainable forms of transportation. People will opt for public transportation if it's reliable. People in all different walks of life, whether in the suburbs or in the downtown core. I'm personally, I live in the suburbs, and more people, my neighbors, would be taking public transportation if it was more accessible and it was more reliable. But the reality is, you have to walk so far just to get a bus. We must prioritize ensuring climate-friendly transportation options are accessible. Public safety. If service decreases when students and young people are typically at nighttime, going out at night, and reducing the service, it incentivizes people to make poor decisions sometimes when it comes to, we'd much rather people take public transit than driving when they probably shouldn't be. And also, I'd like to add, given how brutal the weather can be, making people wait longer is sometimes cruel. Going back on the reliability of transit, we should be opting to make transit more convenient for folks at all times, not just for those working on a typical 9 to 5. I know our region council is responsive to the needs of people when they speak up. And our region's priorities should be focused on improving the quality of life, or at the bare minimum, maintaining the quality of life for those who live in it. By having up to 30-minute wait times, this will most certainly decrease the quality of life for people in this region, whether it be the family who wants to see a movie, take public transit, whether it's bus riders like myself, or students taking the ION. As there will be more people diverting to buses, making the buses more overcrowded.
Nicholas, I'm going to have to end you there. We do have a few questions. Councillor Hunick.
Hi, Nicholas. Thank you for your commitment to climate change action. Thank you for your commitment to public transit, especially the ION. And thank you for delegating to council tonight. I know we can be an intimidating bunch, and I really appreciate your perspective today.
Thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just similar to Councillor Hunick, wanted to say thank you very much, and to you and some others who I think are here to speak about public transit. I certainly share your desire for a really top-notch transit service in our community. I'm a transit and ION user as well, so really appreciate how well the ION works, and certainly the increase in GRT bus service that the region invested in last year, and hoping, it's in the budget for this year as well to have some expanded service, so we'll see how that ends up at final budget day, but just think it's really important. It's great to see the chamber full, but particularly with young people who are who are sharing their thoughts on what they feel is really important, and particularly in when it concerns climate change. So just wanted to, it's more of a comment, I guess, than a question, is to say that today in our discussions, we did pass that amendment. So thanks to Councillor James for proposing that. But so that will go forward to our final budget day. So just keep an eye on that. And thank you for the advocacy that you did.
Thank you.
Councillor James, for a question.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris. Not a question, but I do want to thank Nick and the students for inviting me to speak with you all about transit earlier this week, and to get a feedback regarding the service in areas for improvement. So thank you. It's good to see you all here, and Nick, see you again. But you students, you are, the reason why our ridership is increased so much. So your voice is so important and necessary to this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicholas. Howard from the Citizens Supporting the KW Symphony is up next. Howard, you've got 5 minutes. Good evening.
Good evening, members of council and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity to give some historical context to the situation we find ourselves in with regard to the recently bankrupted Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony. My name is Howard Dick. I'm the Artistic Director Emeritus of the Grand Philharmonic Choir, an organization I led for 38 years. And by the way, the very organization which back in 1945 was responsible for the founding of the KW Symphony. I first guest conducted the orchestra 53 years ago, and I have conducted this illustrious company of accomplished and dedicated musicians literally dozens of times over the years since then. I have watched the orchestra grow and develop from a committed group of largely amateur players to what it was until this past September, a highly accomplished, professional, nationally and internationally recognized ensemble performing at Centre in the Square, a world-class facility built expressly for the KW Symphony. I have also watched with deep gratitude and satisfaction as this community has evolved from the cultural backwater it was half a century ago to become a leader in education, in technology, and not least in the arts. A community which, because of its diversity, its innovation, its tradition of generosity and compassion and excellence, has gained the respect and admiration of cities far beyond our borders. From my vantage point as a national broadcaster with CBC Radio, I was privileged to watch with enormous pride as Waterloo Region took its place as a national leader, a trendsetter, a force to be reckoned with. The Centre in the Square in 1980, the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery in 93, the Perimeter Institute in 99, CG in 2001, the exponential growth of our two universities and Conestoga College, all these and many more progressive initiatives have resulted in this region attracting first-class talent in every field and discipline from around the world. It is in this environment of prosperity and excellence and innovation that we have allowed the crown jewel in the cultural diadem of Waterloo Region, namely the KW Symphony, to disappear. The real reasons for which are still unclear. We are left with more than 50 unemployed professional musicians, all of whom have spent decades and small fortunes honing their craft, and for many of whom playing in the orchestra is their main source of income. Our musicians love this community, but many of them may soon be forced to seek employment elsewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, as of September, we no longer have a professional orchestra. 78 years of tradition, 3/4 of a century of commitment and sacrifice and incremental steps resulting in a cultural achievement of national and international distinction have come crashing down because we allowed it to. We absolutely must reverse this. Members of council, all of you sitting in this chamber, you do so because you care about the well-being of your fellow citizens. And I don't have to tell you that you have your hands full. There are many pressing issues calling for action and for funds. We fully appreciate that. But tonight we want to underscore the fact that the demise of the KW Symphony deals a crushing blow to the reputation of Waterloo Region. I would urge you to add the prompt revival of the KW Symphony to your admittedly long list of priorities. I ask you most earnestly to acknowledge publicly that the loss of our orchestra constitutes a serious problem for our community. To date, we have not heard such expressions of shock and profound regret. Read Elmer Thiessen's letter in today's record, where he directs some rather pointed questions at our municipal leaders. We look to you for leadership in mobilizing the community. We are eager to work with you as leaders committed to improving the quality of life in Waterloo Region. You and the cities and municipalities you represent are in a unique position to help restore our orchestra to its former prominence.
Thank you.
From your past performance, I know that you can do this, and I want to believe that you will once again rise to the occasion.
Thank you, Howard. Appreciate it. I don't see any questions, Howard, so I appreciate your time tonight. I would like to call upon Nicholas Olson of Waterloo, who is up next. Nicholas, you've got 5 minutes, and I just ask for those that are at the podium to pull that microphone up close and speak directly into it so those in the room and at home can hear you clearly.
All right, can you hear me?
I can hear you good.
All right, thank you. So good evening, I'm Nicholas. I'm a current resident of Waterloo and a student at the University of Waterloo. I was going to be speaking on behalf of the motion to opt away from decreasing the ION service times past 8 a.m. and before 8 a.m., but instead I would like to suggest increasing the service times even further. So let me begin by saying I use the ION multiple times a week, typically going to get stuff like groceries and other necessary tasks as I come back from class as I walk right past the ION tracks on the way home. I use it so often, explore so much of the city because of the frequency of the service. Even on weekends or nights, even on weekends and nights, when I would go to events like the former KW Symphony, which I attended quite frequently, the ION was both timely and available. So cutting ION times or even keeping them at the same time isn't what I think we should be doing. The ION doesn't need to turn a profit directly. The ION doesn't need to take a profit directly, and an increase in service will generate increased fares as well as aiding businesses that are close to the ION, such as the stores I visit. Current fares cover much of the basic operation, and the ION has spurred billions of dollars of development, both public and private, into the areas immediately surrounding the stations. The ION is crucial to the expansion of the region of Waterloo and has provided a shining infrastructure project envied by many other communities in Canada. Infrastructure is by far the most expensive cost for the LRT, and with the amount of people on the trains and the crowding of trains, there is a demand for increased service. Because service at this time is still too infrequent for most of the demand, there would be increased revenue from the more people using the rides, and with increased service times, most of the cost has already been spent building the line. There are plenty of extra trains available. There are plenty of times available. Most of the infrastructure has already been built, so there wouldn't be too much of an additional cost from increasing the service relative to that the development and the increased spending on other businesses and industries in the region would provide. So I know other delegates will do an excellent job describing how even keeping the ION times at the same time or decreasing them will have an effect on marginalized communities or even increase road traffic from the ION service times. But I just want to say that it's also fiscally irresponsible to keep ION times at the same extent that they currently are, or decreasing them, because it's fiscally irresponsible to artificially reduce demand on a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project that has made Waterloo one of the best cities in the country for transit. Waterloo is one of 7 cities in the country that has an LRT system along with Edmonton, Toronto, Calgary, Montreal, Vancouver. Plenty of other cities, and Ottawa. Plenty of other cities like Hamilton have struggled to build their own LRT system. And Waterloo shouldn't be using the system to its extent when they could be expanding it further and allowing people to commute in from elsewhere and spur demand to increase the development of the city. That's all I have.
Thank you, Nicholas. I have a question from Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris. Thanks for coming in, Nicholas. Just a couple of questions. I'll get them all out at once, Chair. How often do you take the ION? And then how late do your classes typically go?
So I typically take the ION, I would say about 4 times a week. I live right across from campus, so I'm able to walk to my university classes. However, on the way back from classes, I typically get all my errands done through the use of the ION. So for stores that I wouldn't normally be going to, I do take the ION to get to there because it's much quicker, and the reliability of the ION compared to some of the bus services means it's much easier for me to know that I can plan my day around getting groceries from certain areas. And it also allows me to explore other parts of the region that I wouldn't normally be going to. I would have no reason to go to Kitchener for the most part without the use of the ION service, so that's just one benefit. Well, yes, all the things that Kitchener offers, like the Symphony, it provided an opportunity for me to explore the city. I hadn't been to Kitchener. I hadn't experienced much of it. I really enjoy the city. That's pretty much it. I think the ION service has done a lot for letting students explore the rest of the region outside of University Avenue.
Okay, thank you. And typically, just in terms of times of classes and courses, when do they usually end?
So my latest class, I'm actually missing class right now, but this is the last class, so I thought it was important. I have a class, some evening classes, so from 6:30 to 9:30. So for students that do have to take the ION to transit to classes, they can't take it back. They have to wait a very long time for buses that would be overcrowded since so many university classes end at 9:30. There's plenty of people waiting at the bus shelters when I walk past, and they don't all fit on the buses. So
perfect.
It's important to increase the service
Nicholas.
Councillor Hewinik.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicholas, for missing class right now and for coming to Kitchener, I'm assuming on the LRT, to advocate for the LRT.
Yes.
We appreciate you.
Thank you, Nicholas. I'd like to call upon Damien from Waterloo. Damien, you've got 5 minutes.
All right, are we good? All right, good evening to the Chair and Regional Council. My name is Damien. I'm a resident of Waterloo and one of the several students speaking today in favor of the amendment to keep off-peak ION headways to no more than 15 minutes, though as we are now finding out, that amendment has already been passed. So there are still a few things that I think I should mention just to avoid a situation like this happening again. Like bringing peak headways to 8 minutes or less is a goal I and many residents and students support, and I do thank staff for what was clearly an honest attempt at progress. But the sacrifices we as residents, and especially students, would have to pay in off-peak hours was just far too steep. With off-peak headways already sitting at 15 minutes, which is far too high for such an important service, bringing that time up to 30 minutes would have been devastating. The people who would be most impacted by these changes are those who rely on it most. Low-income shift workers, a group who doesn't often work that 9 to 5, who would be the only ones gaining. And as I'm sure many of you may remember from your time at university, these low-income workers are overrepresented by students. Speaking personally, off-peak compose the majority of my usage of the ION. Whether it be getting to Uptown after a day of studies, getting to and getting home from a night in Kitchener, or getting to and home from work after a late shift at the cinema, I frequently relied on the ION to get me around. As a couple of you already know, if it weren't for the ION, I wouldn't have given up my car when I got here. The ION was my first taste of what high-quality, reliable public transportation felt like. I gave up my car because I knew I'd be saving thousands a year on gas and insurance costs, a cost I wouldn't need to bear in a region like this where I can get around just fine without it. But at 30-minute frequencies, I can guarantee I and many others would not have made that decision because people have lives outside of their 9 to 5s. With headways like what was presented, residents would no longer be able to rely on the train, but instead plan around it. 30 minutes would have destroyed the reliability of the Ion and much of the reason why it has convinced so many residents to drive less or even give up their car completely. So I, the students in the room, as well as what is now over 800 signatories of our petition, thank council for voting in favor of the amendment and to stop the 30-minute headaways. Further, I'd like to make a suggestion to staff and council for further budgets to be bolder in their recommendations to council. Staff understands the risks of cutting off-peak hours, but due to the honorable goal of increasing peak hours to alleviate what is real congestion, they recommended cutting off-peak to make their suggestions more palpable to council. I asked staff to give regional council the opportunity to do the right thing and at the very least present your best recommendation. Whether that be increasing service even further and better than 15 minutes, which is a goal that we are absolutely in support of, or importantly, pushing the Ion service past midnight. We are in the midst of a climate and affordability crisis. If the best option isn't even on the table, then what chance will we have to fix this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damien. I do have a question from Councillor Honig.
Thank you, Damien. We appreciate your advocacy for climate change advocacy and also for the LRT. Just one question. Are you missing class right now?
I am thankfully not missing class right now. So we are good on that front, but I should be studying for an assignment.
Well, in that case, we appreciate you. You can go back and study now.
Thank you so much, Councillor.
Thank you, Damien. I would like to call upon Craig Sloss from Waterloo. Craig, you've got 5 minutes, and I will remind folks that after this delegation, we will take a 10-minute recess. So, Craig, you've got 5 minutes.
All right, good evening, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my perspective on the budget. So on my first slide, between 2019 and 2021, the Waterloo Regional Police Services had a cumulative surplus of $9.3 million. As expenditures for 2023 are starting to come in, we are seeing evidence that the 2023 budget had continued this practice of overfunding the police. The next slide shows that over the first 9 months of the year, the 2023 budget had overestimated police expenditures by about $5.6 million, driven almost entirely by an overestimation of salary costs. Non-tax revenues were underestimated by about $2.5 million. Combined, this means that over the first 9 months of the year, the 2023 budget overfunded the police by $8.1 million. Depending on your political perspective, this either means that we were overtaxed by $8.1 million, or we missed an opportunity to spend $8.1 million on other services, or somewhere in between. On the next slide, we say that if council does not take action, then the overfunding problem will continue in the future. The 2024 budget request is based on an increase above the 2023 budget rather than the actual annualized expenditures from 2023. This means that the overfunding problem from the 2023 budget is going to carry forward into 2024 unless it's addressed. At the same time, we are facing massive tax increases and being asked to consider the absurd prospect of 30-minute wait times for the Ion. Council needs to get to the bottom of the police overfunding problem before approving another budget increase for the police. Now, one of the causes of overfunding in the budget calculation is that the fact the budget calculations are based on the number of officers that the WRPS would like to hire rather than the number of officers that it realistically can hire, as Councillor Deutschman alluded to earlier. On the next slide, when I looked into the information that the WRPS provided to this committee on November 22nd, I came across another reason that we may be overestimating the number of officers that are needed. WRPS cited increases in the number of calls for service as evidence to support its budget request in that memo. However, roughly 2/3 of these are classified as other occurrences, and this got my curiosity up. So, on the next slide, to get a better understanding of what's included as other, I used the publicly available occurrence data on the WRPS website. Roughly 1/3 of occurrences are coded as administrative or not requiring a police response. These have been increasing at an average rate of 4.8% per year and appear to be what is driving the overall increase in occurrences. Moreover, occurrences not in this category have been decreasing at an average rate of 1.4% per year. Despite this decreasing trend, the WRPS justifies its budget request by assuming a minimum 2% annual growth in occurrences in order to project its future workload. Now, this would be a reasonable approach to estimating the workload for call center operators, but workload for officers needs to be based only on occurrences that require a police response. On the next slide, I looked into the Crime Severity Index, which WRPS cites as a reason to hire more officers. Looking at other cities, we don't see any evidence that cities with more officers have lower CSI. Some of the biggest per capita spenders, Toronto, Sudbury, Niagara, have some of the highest CSI. Meanwhile, Halton Region spends the least per capita on the police and has the lowest CSI. Simply throwing money at the police doesn't prevent crime. This council should know that because it's approved increases to the police budget year after year without producing a reduction in the CSI. Ultimately, though, there are limits to what data can tell us. Data analysis can't answer questions about what our values are. Projections of police workload avoid the question of whether the activities that police are working on are the kind of things that we think they actually should be working on. Crime Severity Index doesn't tell us whether our values are consistent with an approach of hiring more officers to enforce laws after crimes have occurred, or if we prefer preventing crimes in the first place. On the next slide, we see that from 2013 to 2017, the police were involved in an increasing number of mental health calls, reaching over 3,300 calls annually between 2017 and 2021. We should be spending our money on mental health support as a preventative measure to reduce the number of mental health calls we receive. For situations in which these calls do happen, the region should invest in non-police responses to mental health crises. Toronto provides an example with its Community Crisis Service, which dispatches mental health professionals to assist individuals experiencing mental health crises.
Craig, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. I do have a question. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you, Craig, for coming in tonight and crunching this data. I'm just curious if you were aware, or if that you could present this also to the Police Services Board, who actually, put the draft budget together and work directly with the chief on issues like this. I mean, a lot of people aren't aware that they, as a member of the public, can do that. So I just wanted to check in if you were aware of that or not.
I was aware of it.
Okay.
I think they usually meet when I'm at work, so.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
fair enough.
Councillor Deutschman for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Sloss, for coming in and providing the information. And of course, it's relevant to us here at Council since we're the ultimate deciders of the budget overall. Could you I see you have one slide left. Could you just tell us what the recommendations were on your final slide?
Yeah, it was just a quick summary of things that I had alluded to earlier in the presentation. So I'm going by memory here, but I think that the things on that slide were requesting more detailed information on how those other occurrences were broken down, and that you should reject the police budget until you've had a chance to revise it to avoid overfunding the police, and that those savings should be reinvested in crime prevention and initiatives to prevent service reductions at other regional services.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sloss. So we will take a 10-minute break. We will be back around 8:05, and we'll ask Kimberly Barber of Kitchener to be prepared and ready to go when we return. Thank you very
I'm
much.
doing my best here.
No, I know, you're doing a heck of a job, so thank you.
My name is Kimberly Barber, and I am the Associate Dean of External Relations, Partnerships, and Graduate Studies in the Faculty of Music at Wilfrid Laurier University. I'm here in support of the KW Symphony on behalf of our music students, our faculty, and as a member of the Kitchener-Waterloo arts community. The KWS is more than just an arts organization. It is a vital part of an arts ecosystem. One of the most enduring cultural organizations in the region, the KWS enjoys national stature as one of the major orchestras in the country, and its demise has sent shockwaves through the entire Canadian musical community. When we lose an arts organization of this magnitude, the ripples are far-reaching. This loss affects not just the orchestra, its musicians and audience, but educational institutions, related arts organizations, and community groups. The fact that KW had a major orchestra was a draw for me when I first returned from Germany to Canada to the region in 2002 as a new faculty member. A thriving orchestra is a signal to would-be residents of a vibrant cultural life in this city. For us at Laurier, the KWS has been a powerful recruitment tool, encouraging the best and brightest students to attend our program, not only because of the attraction of high-quality music events, but also for the many collaborative opportunities afforded to them through what was a growing and robust partnership. Not only do many of our adjunct faculty members play in the orchestra, but our students have been increasingly involved in meaningful experiential projects over the last several years. Since 2016, we have collaborated on no less than 3 opera productions involving over 200 students. In the last year alone, we collaborated on the La Traviata opera performance. One of our senior students was soloist with Thorgy Thor and the Thorchestra. Composition students had their work read and workshopped by the orchestra, led and conducted by our dean, Cynthia Johnston-Turner. And several students formed the group of backup singers for Tim Baker's concert. I also know that Dean Johnston-Turner was working on several ideas and projects to strengthen this relationship between Laurier Music and the KWS. For some of these students, this was their first time performing with a symphony orchestra, the first time they had ever set foot on stage in a large concert hall. These are thrilling, indelible moments for young artists beginning to learn their craft. You see some of them pictured backstage at Center in the Square last year. I'll share a brief anecdote from one such moment, the first rehearsal that our student chorus had with the orchestra for La Traviata. The students were assembled in the bleachers at Conrad Center, the orchestra on the floor. The moment when the orchestra played the opening bars of the overture, one of my students, visibly electrified, held her hands up to her face in complete awe and looked at me, her eyes full of tears, her mouth agape. She was completely overwhelmed by the power of a live professional orchestra. Now imagine the next scenario. One of my students was to perform her professional debut as a soloist in Mendelssohn's Hymn of Praise this year with the orchestra. She was completely over the moon to have been given this opportunity, which included significant mentoring as part of the partnership. She was completely heartbroken when she learned the orchestra would not have a season. The KWS is more than an orchestra. Its members are our neighbors, members of our community who invest in its vibrancy. They contribute countless acts of service, whether in community concerts or at local soup kitchens. They are part of a vast web of arts and music making across this region, and they matter. Please preserve their funding. We neglect the arts at our peril. We may not always get it right, but if we abandon artists, we will be all poorer for it. When considering arts funding, consider the words of Ian Brown, Globe and Mail journalist, who wrote in May of 2020, "Words, music, dancing, these are ancient human things. We sometimes get careless and call them the arts. maybe when the pandemic is over and we are reapportioning funds again, we'll remember how important they were in a dark time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. We do have a question from Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think anyone in the room doubts the impact the symphony has had on the community. And I think we all appreciate it and understand the issue in front of us, which is the loss of a cultural organization. But my question really revolves around, in the past, when organizations have gotten into trouble financially, we would hear about it. They may approach council before, quote, bankruptcy. We didn't hear that. Last year, I think the orchestra got $348,000. I don't remember any kind of signs that something was going on that this would not continue on. So I think as a councillor and as perhaps a person in the future that will, as a councillor, support the symphony again, I think we need to know what happened and why people didn't get refunds and things like that. So that's a broad statement. It's also a question.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, all right.
Not being part of the symphony myself.
Yeah.
I'm just an advocate, and they were a strong partner for us at Laurier, and we miss the organization terribly.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I think as a council and as a community, we need to know what happened, and we don't know that. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'd like to call upon Shiva Nashwin from Waterloo. See, you're ready to rock and roll there. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. You've got 5 minutes.
All right. Good evening, councillors. Firstly, I want to convey my thanks to Mayor Verbranovic. He's not here. Shiva and I are both huge housing advocates, and he was the first mayor in the region to legalize fourplexes. There was a huge shout out to City of Kitchener. And then secondly, our mayor, Mayor McCabe, and her dream team could not resist raising the stakes even further. Waterloo City Councillor Royce Bodley's motion to legalize not just fourplexes, but 4 stories as of right passed unanimously. And both of us are so proud of our city for achieving this milestone. And I sincerely hope Mayor Liggett and Cambridge's council accepts this challenge and takes the baton to the next level and maybe legalizes like 8 plexes as of right and 8 stories as of right. The race is on. And maybe our townships could show us how it's done. And maybe one day, Mayor Salonen, us, millennials and Gen Z that are behind us would get to have a home one day. Well, that being said, I'll get to why we are today. So we are so fortunate in the region of Waterloo to have the ION service. It's our region's most precious possession and Ottawa's envy. It's an absolute game changer, and it is the silver bullet that will enable our region to embrace urban densities, creating more housing supply. And this dedicated transit will help us to move away from the car-centric planning that we are currently doing. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are passionate about fixing the housing crisis, and every time we present before Waterloo City Council, we mention the ION. We use that as a tool to make our point, and we always urge council to align land use planning and accessibility decisions with the help of the ION. It gives us a rock-solid argument to end parking minimums finally in the city of Waterloo. Mayor McCabe, expect us next over there. All right, and reliable high-frequency rail transit is the backbone of the GRT. So running the ION once every half hour at peak times just won't cut it, and the 7 is not a replacement for the ION. And after 8 p.m., I can confirm the LRT is already full to the brim. So how would cutting services to once every 30 minutes help us with the crowded trains? So today I'd like to thank Councillor Colleen James for her leadership in engaging with the community, especially with the youth on the ION service improvements. Keeping the off-peak frequency to at 15 minutes is huge for riders like us, and we are thankful. I'm so heartened to see so many students from all political leanings presenting before council today. So we personally were inspired by Rodney Chan, a transit advocate who had organized this, and also by Nick Abuaje, who's the president of the UW Young Liberals. He's a close friend, and also our close friend, Damien Mikel from the UW NDP. We like to hedge our bets when it comes to politics, so we are friends with both the NDP and the Liberals. So thank you both. Well, jokes apart, it's very heartening to see the younger residents come to regional council and advocate for what they believe in. And it would be very wise on council's part to listen to the experiences of these students who rely on the GRT as their primary mode of transit and build a region that will work for them.
I think it was highlighted earlier today, but there's one other pain point with respect to transit that I want to bring up again, which is the 201 bus route. It runs from Conestoga Mall to Conestoga College, and it's perhaps one of the busiest routes that we have in the region. So I can tell you that getting on that bus is the second hardest thing to do in the region of Waterloo. The first is finding an apartment for rent. I've been there. I do not want to do that again. We have high ridership, and it's an amazing problem to have. In September 2023, we had the highest ever ridership, and by integrated urban planning, we'll be able to attract more riders over time. In this budget discussion, I learned that we are already pushing the limits of the service contract that we have, and that was why we had the initial 30-minute service proposed in the first place. I just want to say that for the future, even 15 minutes won't cut it. We will need increased investment in transit to meet future demand. I will save some time for myself next year, and I'll say it just now. Please invest more in transit. Please run the ION to Cambridge. Yes. Building housing density while expanding transit capacity is the golden formula for unlocking sustainable growth. So let's move on full steam ahead on legalizing housing and improving transit. We all know we are in the middle of a housing crisis, and the only way we come out of this crisis is by building sustainable, dense, and transit-oriented communities. Thank you.
Thank you to you both. Lots of enthusiasm there. We have questions. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And I was impressed with your enthusiasm and your presentation. And so I would encourage you to go to Cambridge and sell your fourplex and tell them how much you love the ION.
Absolutely.
I would love to go, but the ION doesn't go to Cambridge. So it will take me like 2 hours to get to Cambridge at the points. That's the only reason why I'm not at Cambridge, the council, by the way.
Okay.
I am 10 minutes away from Waterloo Council, and Mayor McCabe knows how often I show up there. The only reason I'm not at Cambridge is because it will take me 2 hours to go there.
We will show up, and our friends will probably support us too.
I'll give you a ride.
So, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Hewinik.
Thank you both for being the most enthusiastic delegation ever. Thank you for your commitment to climate action and transit, and especially your respect for the democratic process. You are much appreciated in this region. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I'd like to call upon Isabella from Waterloo. Good evening, Isabella. You've got 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Isabela Ștefănescu, and I have been involved in making art and supporting art making in the region for over 30 years. And I take the ION to go to the symphony. So I would miss it very much if it wouldn't circulate at good times. Because I do hope to go back to the symphony. So I'm here to ask you to support the symphony that will be reborn. Our very underfunded sector is always in churn. And then there was COVID. And across the land and across the world, the art sector is suffering from long COVID, our orchestra included. I want to answer the question that Councillor Craig asked about how come the symphony did not come to council. Well, in fact, there is a staff report dated February 7th that has a couple of letters attached to them, to that staff report. The staff report has a letter from Andrew Bennett, the former manager of the KW Symphony, to the regional council, explaining exactly the dire strait in which the symphony found itself. There are also a couple of letters that Councillor Redman, Chair Redman wrote to the Minister of Culture, provincial, and federal, asking for help for our symphony, whose COVID additional help was going to end and was going to put this organization into dire straits. But no matter how bad things have been in the art sector, we have had a constant, and that's artists. Okay, and what we see tonight is these artists who got together and rolled their sleeves up and organized and raised funds, and they're here tonight. And it's them who we have to support. They're still here. We still have an intact ensemble of 52 world-class musicians. Other arts organizations support them. World-class artists support them. Our community supports them. But this symphony cannot become renewed without your support. This is about the huge civic footprint of the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony. This is about regional pride and bragging rights. A short anecdote. In 1988, after a performance by the Royal Winnipeg Ballet in Bangkok, the head of their equivalent of their Petrocan said to the head of the Canadian High Commissioner, said, if you people can make pipelines the way you dance, let's do business. I can very well imagine that a visiting dignitary from Germany or France or Switzerland, where our Waterloo Regional Economic Development recently went to ask for investment, that they would come and listen to our symphony and they would say to our chair, if you people can code, if you people can do precise manufacturing, the way you can play music, let's do business. But nobody goes to the symphony because it makes economic sense. We go for the collective effervescence of 2,000 people listening to 52 top musicians, playing demanded and complex music, enhanced naturally, mysteriously, in our world-class concert hall. This is our heritage. This is our showcase. We cannot afford to lose the KW Symphony. So I urge you to keep the annual grant for the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony Orchestra on the budget, because this orchestra will be back, and this money will leverage money from the provincial funders and from the federal funders. And no arts organization can succeed without support from its local government.
Thank you, Isabella. Appreciate your time tonight. I don't see any questions, so I'd ask Joanne Bender, piano teacher, KW Symphony Players Association, to join us next. Joanne, good evening.
Chair Redmond, regional councilors. My name is Joanne Bender. I'm a piano teacher in Waterloo. First of all, I want to thank you for the work you do to make Waterloo Region a wonderful place to live. We truly have a great community where music, arts, and culture are a vital part of our quality of life. The KW Symphony has always and should continue to be at the pinnacle. Tonight, I could talk about the hundreds of thrilling KWS concerts that families and friends have absolutely loved at the Center in the Square. One in particular that comes to mind at this time of year is the KWS Yuletide Spectacular, which many times was my Christmas gift to my piano students. This sparkling concert showcased many children's choirs and dance studios, offering them a fabulous performing opportunity in a world-class venue with top-notch musicians while spreading joy and love to a delighted audience. But this is in the past. I could talk about the many times I volunteered at the KWS school concerts at the Center in the Square, where dozens of buses brought hundreds of school children to hear the symphony play. The enthusiasm of these kids for the school concerts was evident. It was wonderful to see children from all ethnic and cultural backgrounds joining together with music as their common language. Many of them would never have had such an enriching and educational experience if it had not been for the KW Symphony School Concert Program. But that is in the past. I could talk about the KWS ensembles that went into the schools to play and talk to students, educating them musically in a way that goes far beyond the music teaching that our public school system provides. I know how much kids loved these special times with real live KWS musicians, but that is also in the past. I could talk about the KWS Youth Orchestra, a junior version of the symphony whose young, talented musicians aspired to the level of their professional KWS mentors. Some of these youth orchestra members went on to study music at Wilfrid Laurier University, where their teachers were KWS musicians. And some have gone on to be full-time members of the KW Symphony. Thanks to WLU, this youth orchestra training is continuing at present, but without these temporary measures, the youth orchestra would be a thing of the past. But what I do want to talk about tonight is the future, and that is why I have brought two of my piano students with me, Anar and Thomas Musa. Anar and Thomas are some of the young people who represent our future. They have attended many symphony concerts at Center in the Square because their parents know the value of music in a well-rounded student's education. Like all children in the past few years of the pandemic, Anar and Thomas were forced to stay at home, isolated from teachers and friends for long periods of time. One of the outcomes for some children, unfortunately, was that they became addicted to screens and social media, which we now know can have a negative effect on young minds. We know, sadly, of the mental health challenges facing our younger generation. We also know that hearing beautiful symphonic music resounding in an acoustically brilliant concert hall can lift our spirits, bringing beauty, joy, and peace. And do we ever know how much we need beauty, joy, and peace in our troubled world? So I come tonight to add my support and the support of many members of our community to the presentation made by the KWS Players Association. This is a sincere, heartfelt request for you to invest in the future of our community, particularly in our children and youth who have had so much taken away from them. I urge you to be visionaries and to continue funding the KWS Players Association with the same funding you gave previously to KW Symphony, trusting that these talented, intelligent, hardworking, responsible musicians will once again make our community proud and keep Waterloo Region as a positive cultural landmark in our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I don't see any questions, so appreciate your time. And to Anar and Thomas, thank you for your patience and attentiveness. I'm sure you play magnificently if you can sit through the meeting like you did tonight, so thank you for coming. Up next, we have Michelle from Waterloo. I believe she's appearing in person. Oh, sorry, we've got Julian Isham. Sorry, my apologies. Julian Isham from Kitchener. Julian, if you're here.
$14 million, 30 seconds, 2.2 billion, genocide. This is very important. 30 seconds was the time between the sirens and the sound of the guns that the police fired when they killed Bo Baker. $15 million is what the police want in their budget. $2.2 billion is the money that was promised to end the homeless crisis. Yet the homeless crisis continues. I would say it's not a crisis. I would say it is genocide. And I would look at the UN Declaration of what is genocide, which Canada is not a signatory of. A specific group, homeless people and poor people can be defined as such, that are targeted for extinction. And I would say with the money that is going to the police to act as an occupational army in poor neighborhoods, to act as social workers without training, that in 30 seconds, when they get a mental health call, there's 30 seconds between the sirens and the gunshots. I think that is a sign of genocide. I think the fact that 2 weeks ago, 48 people overdosed in this region is also a sign of genocide. 8 people in one day. These deaths are preventable. I think the fact that every time a tent goes up in Kitchener, the police is there to put it down is also a sign of genocide. I think the fact that we're shutting down low-income housing, that a one-bedroom apartment goes for as much as $800, $900, while welfare is at maximum $700, is genocide. And I think that the region has a responsibility not to sit and joke around, but actually do something about it. We were talking earlier about culture and the symphony. And I think it's interesting. The first thing that Hitler did when he went into Poland was he killed all the intellectuals and he killed all the artists. One of the things that the Azov Brigade has done when they invaded Transnistria and Moldova, claiming it as Ukraine, an openly fascist group, is attack intellectuals, artists, musicians. Mike Harris, one of the first things he did when he came into power is attack musicians, artists. Why? Because artists put a mirror to society. Musicians put a mirror to society. And only in a totalitarian society do people not want to see what is going on. The region has a responsibility. You are there to represent not just the rich. You are there not just to represent the landlords, but all people. How much money was wasted on policing Ruse Island? How much money was wasted on my trial? How much money was wasted 2 years before the G20, following me around, creating a fake friend, arresting me, 21 other people? How much money is wasted right now by police doing covert operations to stop people from protesting or speaking out to the totalitarianism that we see today? What happened to the police officer that shot Bo Baker? What happens to the police officers that are shooting people, other people? The fact that there's an opioid epidemic is not accidental. People are bludgeoning their consciousness because we live in a society that does not meet Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We live in a two-tier society where poor people and the working class are second-class citizens. There is no political party since Bob Rae came to power that represents poor people. Speaking on that, I would like to talk about how poor people and homeless people are not allowed to vote in the by-election through gerrymandering and things such as people who are sleeping at a better tent city.
Ms. Loricum, you've had your 5 minutes tonight. We appreciate you coming in. You've had your time, so thank you. I don't see any questions, so appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in. I'd like to call upon Michelle and Casa. Please refrain from clapping. Michelle and Casa from Waterloo. If you're here in person, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Incasa. You actually got it right the first time, so no worries. I'm a final year environment student at Waterloo, and I'm here today in my capacity as this climate justice student organizer and one of the co-leads of the climate justice ecosystem. Thankfully, I'm not missing class, so I'm able to stay for really long today. And I'm wearing my keffiyeh today in solidarity with Palestinian students and community members. So I want to start by saying that I love Waterloo Region. I like to joke that I am KW's #1 defender, which is not an opinion that goes down well with cynical students, but I stand by it. I moved here to start my undergrad in 2019, and I really fell in love with this community. I think there's a lot to love. There's a thriving community life where people really get to know each other and care about each other. There's farmers markets and summer festivals and a really robust network of arts and culture. So before I get into my main points, I just want to say that as a former violinist and a lover of classical music, I was a loyal patron of the KWS and was always appreciative of how its pricing was accessible to students. And I think its end really impacts us as a community, and we will surely mourn the loss of such an important institution, and I think it is worth saving. What I want to say today is that students don't live isolated lives. We interact and are affected by what goes on in Waterloo Region, and I've watched with great concern and increasing distress at the precarity that I see around me, which really drives my advocacy work at Waterloo. So 2 things I want to highlight in particular. The first is housing. I think this is a chronic issue. If you talk to any student, if you talk to anyone basically, maybe under the age of 50, you'll realize that housing is a chronic problem. As a student myself, I faced a host of issues, and I know I'm definitely very lucky. I've been very lucky to not have had exploitative landlords, have paid exorbitant rents. I've never had an issue with maintenance or security like I know so many of my other peers have. I read in a recent article that Waterloo Region is short of 5,000 student beds, which I think constitutes a crisis, and the average rent is now over $950 a month, which is definitely unaffordable for many students. The second issue I want to highlight is food insecurity. I read a recent article that said that students accessing food banks increased by 220% in October. 13% of students in Waterloo reported using food banks, and 47% worried about being able to afford basic necessities. This is a crisis. I think this has been ongoing for a long time, exacerbated by a host of other issues that students face. But it's clear that students are increasingly accessing supports out in the community. And what happens at Waterloo, what happens at Conestoga or Laurier is not in isolation. At Waterloo, we are a school of over 30,000 students, and that has ripple effects throughout the community. However, students have limited capacity and ability to participate in municipal level politics. I myself, this is my first time here in council, and I know that I am privileged to be here because I don't have class. I have the time to be here. I have the mental capacity and the energy, but I know so many of my peers don't, because of the vicious cycle perpetuated by the strain caused by these intersecting crises, especially increasing unaffordability. And it's very concerning to me to see that the police are slated to get a budget increase despite their surplus, while other services fundings fall short. I echo the sentiments of my previous delegators, especially folks from community justice initiatives and the Lived Expertise Working Group, as well as the folks standing in the back of the room and who are rallying downstairs to bring attention to the glaring lack of funding for community supports to address poverty and homelessness. We need caring upstream solutions, not more policing. What I was here to talk about today was actually public transit, but since we have since discovered that the proposed amendment by Councillor James is passed, I just want to speak sort of broadly about transit and why it's important. As a student, I use public transit every single day, and my quality of life depends on it. I'm not sure if I can say the same for many of decision makers here in the room. So I just want to say that we need more transit. We need more frequent transit. We need more reliable and accurate transit that goes beyond just midnight. I think we need much more ION and buses. I want to say, I know I'm running out of time here, that Students are a really large stakeholder, and you really need to listen to us when we tell you that we have problems with overcrowding or unreliability, and many of us rely on buses and the ION to get to and from school, to and from our responsibilities and other things. So again, thank you for supporting Councillor James' amendment. I'm really happy to see that there's going to be increases in services and urge you to do even more. Again, we showed up for you today, as here I am with my group of student delegators here. And thank you again for your support, and I urge you to continue to do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. I don't see any questions. So I'd like to invite Nigel Gorgic of Waterloo. I think he's from New Hamburg, but maybe now he's from Waterloo. I know the Nigel from New Hamburg, so, or Wilmot. But Nigel, good evening. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Good evening, Council. Please rest assured I've not skipped a class to be here today. I have skipped dinner, so I'll be brief. This evening, I'm speaking in favour of regional staff's recommendation for maintaining the 15-minute interval between trains during off-peak hours and increasing service in the peak time during the summer to a 10-minute interval. I know that Councillor James has been vocal in her support of this amendment, and I thank her for her advocacy. The ION is just 4 years old, and it's already the envy of other Canadian cities. This is no small feat, and the region has every right to feel proud of this phenomenal success. I live in Waterloo and work a 9-to-5 job in Cambridge, and speaking as a commuter who uses the region's LRT and buses, the key to this success is the reliability and frequency of the system. It serves my needs because of the hours I work. However, not everyone works office hours. Reducing the ION's frequency would cause inconvenience for many local residents and make public transit less attractive to commuters during hours that are considered off-peak. We've had our first real taste of winter this week. Can you imagine someone finishing their shift at Grand River Hospital, crossing the road and having to wait 30 minutes in those conditions for their ride home? Forcing those workers into privately owned vehicles would be a major step backwards. Not everyone works 9 to 5. Not everyone can afford to own a car, and not everyone wants to put another privately owned vehicle on our roads. I come from a country where public transit is revered in cities because it is a vital resource for moving masses of people in an efficient way. The ION is doing an equally good job of that, and it deserves to be equally respected. My wife, who enjoys the convenience of driving, has begun using the ION at weekends when we're attending community events because the LRT runs frequently enough that it becomes a viable alternative to her car. Quite honestly, I can think of no better endorsement. Is the ION perfect? There's definitely room for improvement, as we saw when the service was disrupted earlier this month after relatively light snowfall. But that also happens in countries that have been running rail systems for nearly 2 centuries. When I lived in England, I remember trains grinding to a halt due to leaves on the track, as well as, believe it or not, the wrong type of snow. There isn't much that I would suggest you copy from the City of Toronto, but when I visited it recently, I was able to pay my transit fare by tapping my debit card without the need for having the correct amount of cash. I would like to see the region adding this convenient form of payment to make public transit even more attractive. Thank you to the region for having the foresight to invest in creating the LRT, which has become an essential community resource. You should continue to make the system an attractive and viable way of getting around our communities, and a simple way to do that is to maintain, or better yet improve, the frequency of the ION schedule, so that people can continue to see the benefit of using it. And thank you for voting in favour of staff's service frequency recommendation.
Thank you, Nigel. I don't see any questions, so I appreciate your time tonight. I'd like to ask Sam Gonclave Horton of Waterloo to come to the podium. Sam, you've got 5 minutes. Good evening.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Sam Gonsalves Horton, and I'm a first-year planning student at the University of Waterloo and a proud member of Ward 6. Before I begin, I'd like to express my sincerest thanks to Councillor Colleen James for being such a major catalyst for student voices here in person tonight. You listened, we showed up. Thank you. Like many of my peers, I am here today to express my strong support of the now passed amendment to maintain ion peak headways at 10 minutes and off-peak headways at 15 minutes. Both from my own experience using the system and through what I've learned in my planning courses, I believe that the ion stands as some of the best transit in not only Ontario, but in all of Canada. It has made my life so much easier, both as a university student, as well as somebody who lives in Waterloo without a car. I believe that the current proposed changes to 8 minutes on peak and 30 minutes off peak would be a massive blow to the system and would greatly affect both somebody in my own situation as well as other residents in Waterloo region. Although the 8-minute peak frequency seems like a step in the right direction, I think that the further expansion of peak headways should try and aim for 7.5 minutes. Although 30 seconds doesn't seem like a huge difference, this has a profound impact on the navigability of the system. The beauty of the 10 and 7.5 minute frequencies lies in their simplicity. Once you know one time, you know them all. 8-minute frequencies disrupt this consistent interval, which is one of the main reasons why the ion is such a great system. Although I agree with improving peak headways, this should never come at the expense of off-peak headways. 30 minutes is an unacceptable wait time, especially on a system of the ion's quality. These changes will effectively cut off anyone who consistently uses the ion during off-peak hours. Students coming home late from class, shift workers who have late shifts, and those who rely solely on public and active transportation will be disproportionately affected by these changes. For me, 30-minute off-peak headways means not attending the orchestra at Waterloo performance 2 Sundays ago. For me, 30-minute off-peak headways means not going out with my friends to see The Room at the Princess Cinema last Friday. For some of my friends, 30-minute off-peak headways means driving instead of taking the ion to go to work at Conestoga Mall. The ion is an outstanding system, and I believe that with careful consideration and improvements, we can maintain its excellence. Therefore, in the light of the passing of the amendment, I strongly suggest even bolder investment into GRT. This means further addressing overcrowding at peak hours, better express bus service, further reducing 15-minute off-peak headways, and perhaps more importantly, extending the ion to Cambridge so Shiva and Ashwin can finally visit. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. Appreciate your time tonight. Don't have any questions for you. Remington Z of Waterloo, you've got 5 minutes. You're up next. Remington, are you here tonight? Oh, hi. Good evening.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Remington. I'm a student at the University of Waterloo. I would like to start by thanking Council for the opportunities to speak here today, and everyone else for being here and sharing their perspectives and participating in this process. I originally wrote my speech about the 30-minute headway of the ion that's being proposed, and now that I know the amendment has been passed, I realize that every single one of my points applies equally, if not more so, to the 30-minute waits for buses in off-peak hours. Especially in the evenings, I take the ion and the buses a lot in the evenings during off-peak hours because I stay pretty late on campus to study. And especially after dark, I don't always feel safe waiting outside for a long time. And this is an even bigger problem with the buses than the ion, as the ion stations are better lit. With a 30-minute headway, I might have to choose between getting somewhere 10 minutes late or getting there 20 minutes early and just wandering around in the dark. Most of my friends have to check the schedules before they leave our hangouts and stay a bit later if they have to wait for the bus or the ion. But if I'm going to an event with a set beginning and end time, then I don't always have the opportunity to stay later or have somewhere safe to wait if I show up early. Without easily accessible, reliable transit in the region in the evenings, a lot of students would probably just make the choice to not go out, hole up at the university, and not participate in life in the region with all of the art and entertainment it offers. Also, this is from my old ION-related script. If missing the train means waiting half an hour for it, I know a lot of people who would just run across the tracks right in front of the train in the station, and that's obviously not safe. With 30-minute waits, short trips are also just not worth it sometimes. If taking the bus somewhere saves me 15 minutes compared to just walking, then with a 30-minute wait, there's a 50% chance that I'm gonna lose those 15 minutes because I have to wait longer than that for the bus. Of course, then the alternative is walking, which could be faster, and there's probably something wrong with the transit system if I can walk somewhere faster than I can take the bus. And again, walking, especially in the winter as the nights are getting longer, means walking out on the dark, icy roads, and I'm a barely 5-foot disabled woman. I would really rather not risk that. And the conclusion of my speech is, again, very ION-oriented. The ION is cool. I love the ION. Waterloo is awesome for having the ION. But yeah, I'm just here to share a little bit of my experience and my concerns about the long wait times for transit. And I am very excited to see all the other people with big ideas to share on how to make transit better. Thank you.
Thank you, Remington. Appreciate your time tonight. I don't see any questions, so I'll ask Jack Doon-Maclow of Waterloo to come up to the microphone. I believe they're here in person. Jack, you've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. I am here today to speak against the half-hour ION and also against half-hour bus service and in support of the amendment. I have been a full-time transit user in Waterloo Region since 2016, and I think that the ION is the best thing that has ever happened to transit in Waterloo Region. It is by far the most reliable, useful, and well-connected route, and a big part of that is due to how frequently it runs at all hours of the day. I am an affordable transit pass user. I make less than $10,000 a year, and I pay rent on that. I am disabled and I can't drive, and even if I could drive, I wouldn't be able to afford a car anyway. I also can't afford rideshare options like Uber or taxis, so I am wholly, absolutely dependent on transit to get where I need to go in all aspects of my life, including work, appointments, groceries, social events, and anything else. For me, frequency of transit represents my freedom, my access to income and services, my safety, and my quality of life. The jobs that I am able to get with my disability are typically low-wage shift work that ends late in the evening. Whether it's the ION or buses, having half-hour frequency in the evening severely limits the radius that I am able to look for work. When I look for work, I have to consider not only my total commute time, but also the timing of buses and the timing of transfers. For example, if my commute involves a transfer and I'm waiting 25 minutes for that transfer, that significantly extends my total commute time with just the waiting. Alternatively, if the transfer window is short and my bus is late, so I miss the transfer, again, I end up adding half an hour to my commute just from the bus being late. And in this case, I admit I would be at risk of running into traffic to catch that bus or train. And I know I'm not the only one. I see it happen all the time. I would also like to advocate for extending bus times past midnight, including during the summer and on weekends. I have been in the position before where I've had to walk home from work because there are no buses running when I got off work. This further limits the jobs that I'm able to accept. Last year, I lived here on Frederick Street, on the other side of the highway down towards Victoria. The only bus that comes this way is the 20, which is a half-hour service bus. To come home from work, I would take the ION down to Queen, and then I would walk for half an hour down Frederick to get home because it took the exact same amount of time to walk as it did to wait for the bus. I would be tired from work and hungry, and sometimes it was -15 or raining or snowing or the sidewalks weren't plowed or it was dangerously late to be out alone. But I found walking was almost always the safer option, especially in winter when walking would keep me warmer. This is what happens with half-hour service. This is what riders have to think about no matter what the route. In my opinion, every single route should run on a minimum of 15 minutes, and I would love for this to be a long-term goal of the region. For those of us who have no choice but to depend on this infrastructure, hearing that the ION, a core route of the region, would be cut to half-hour service during our working hours, it felt like our time and our quality of life were not valued. I thank the council for voting in favor of the amendment to ION service, and I ask you to please continue to prioritize transit frequency. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I do have a question from Councillor Huenick.
Thank you, Jack, for coming and for openly sharing of your life experiences and for also endorsing the affordable transit program.
No problem.
Thank you. Rodney Chan from Waterloo, I believe, is appearing in person. We do have a presentation to share with the community. We'll get that presentation up. Thank you for joining us, Rodney. You've got 5 minutes.
Will the presentation be put up? Okay.
Yep.
So hi, my name is Rodney. I'm a third-year planning student, and I live in Waterloo. This was me last Halloween, being the ION because I love it that much. You guys laugh, but it's great, right? It's preventing sprawl. It's leading to intensification, the economic benefits, and it's a great transit route, which is why I'm here to advocate for it today. Next. When I first heard about the preliminary budget where the off-peak hours would be cut to every 30 minutes, I was shocked because this picture I just took this year, that's 11:58. This is the last train. Look how many students and people are taking it. There is demand in the evening and off-peak hours, and we should be expanding hours and expanding service instead of cutting it. And I know that staff wanted the key issue was crowding during peak hour, and with limited funding, they had to move off-peak service to on-peak service. And I wish we were in a situation where there was enough funding to solve on-peak crowding, while not at the expense at off-peak service. Even though I'm in great support of this amendment, and I thank you, Councillor James, for bringing it up, this still does not solve the problem of crowding on peak. Every 10 minutes is not enough. Next slide, please. So I've been seeing on Twitter too, it's not just me that's noticing, people are seeing that there's demand in the evening, whether on the train, on the platforms, while it's dark. And it also is a safety concern, right? I don't want to be waiting 15, 30 minutes in the dark. Next slide, please. We also had a petition. I took this picture last night. But I think we have more than 800 signatures today, so we have a lot of support for better transit and especially a frequent ION. Next slide, please. I'm just looking at my time, 3 minutes. Okay, I would also like to talk about different opportunities. I know University Avenue is being reconstructed soon in 2026, but there's still time. There's next slide, please. Between Albert Street and Weber on University, construction will happen in 2026, but a detailed design should be coming soon. Next slide, please. This is the current preferred alternative, and I will note that in the public consultation, there was no alternative for bus lanes. You can't call that public consultation without giving the full range of options. So next slide, please. I created my preferred alternative with bus lanes, and you get all modes. There's still room for cars going both ways. There's still room for a median or a turn lane. There's pedestrians get their own space. Cyclists get their own space. This better reflects the modal share of University Avenue. So many people use buses on University Avenue. And with the reconstruction, this is all, you just need to use red asphalt instead of black asphalt. This doesn't cost much. But even right now, you can use a very low initial capital cost to just paint it red and signage. And that saves you money in the long run. By taking buses out of traffic, you need less buses to run, and service runs faster, so there's more throughput. So it actually saves you money in the long run. Next slide, please. So why University Avenue? Well, there's 5 buses along this corridor, including an I-Express route. They're all overcrowded and chronically late. All my friends can tell you that it's almost impossible to get on buses sometimes. And it's crazy that there's no bus lanes here, even though there's so many routes. Next slide, please. So you can see I took a picture on a bus on a weekday afternoon, crowded. And just, this is at University and King, and I just wanted to show what the pedestrian environment is like. 5 to 6 lanes, all cars. It's not very hospitable to be a pedestrian or transit user here. We need to redistribute the space so it is more equitable for people who use any mode. Next slide, please. this is what I would think bus lanes could look like, right? So, right, you still have the car lanes, but now you have bus lanes on the edges. Next slide, please. And people do this all around the world, in the US, in the UK, in Nigeria, in Korea, everywhere. This is like standard practice. Next slide, please. Even closer to home, I'm originally from York region. We have the Viva BRT. London is building BRT, but we don't even need BRT. We just need bus lanes. In Toronto, this is Eglinton East. They just painted the street red. They didn't reconstruct it, redesign it, just painted the lanes red. And what happened? Next slide, please. Commute times went down. AM peak, 2 minutes less. PM peak, 5 minutes less. Transit reliability went up 12%. This was during COVID, so there's some the data isn't the greatest, but it shows there's plenty of studies across the world that show that bus lanes work. And I just wanted to show a more local example. Next slide, please.
Actually, Rodney, thank you for your.
Can I just have it go to the
that'll be
last
it
slide?
for your time tonight, but we do have a couple questions. So, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Through you, excuse me, through you, Chair Rodney, I love your commitment to the Iron, and I'm wondering maybe for next Halloween if I can borrow your costume.
Well, maybe I can be an ion and you can be a card to collide. That would be a very scary and spooky Halloween situation.
Question, Councillor Salonen.
Thank you very much for sharing today, Rodney, and I look forward to seeing you as a planner in the very near future, I think. I think you brought a great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Deutschman for a question.
Yeah, Ronnie, quality stuff. I do have a question. Reminds me of a group, TriTag, who 10 years ago were instrumental in a lot of the things that happened with respect to ION and massive transit improvement. I always love the work that these guys did. Can you show the last slide, please?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's see it.
Nothing. I just had showing Toronto they picked key corridors to implement the bus lanes on, and I think staff know better than me who work at GRT which corridors would be a best candidate. And my last slide is just to conclude all my findings. Yeah. But speaking of TriTag, you will be hearing from us soon. I'm restarting it with an old board member, so this is not the end of me.
Well, it's great. I'll pass that on to a young man I was talking to just the other day, and I mentioned it to him, so I'll pass on your name to him. If you could send me your contact information, then I can pass.
How would I go about giving you my contact information?
Just go online on the website for the councillor email. Just send me your contact info.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod.
Rodney. Up next is Marinus de Groot of Kitchener. Marinus, you've got 5 minutes, and I believe there's also a presentation, so we'll put that up.
Chair Redmond, councillors, I'm here speaking tonight as a member of the newly formed Citizens Supporting the KW Symphony, and as something of a Waterloo County patriot, if that's the right term, maybe loyalist, that's the better term. And that's why I asked the clerk to display it's redundant, it's there right in front, behind you all the time, the original Waterloo County seal with the lion and the lamb and the crown, and the words peace and prosperity. And I wrote a little essay about that once entitled The Lion and the Lamb, a Wonderful Civics Emblem. And one of the things that's wonderful about it is that it distinguishes us. Alongside all the badges and logos and coats of arms borne by civic bodies all over the world, this one really stands out. Now, the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, the Grand Philharmonic Choir, and the Rafi Armenian Concert Hall distinguish us in comparable ways. No other mid-sized urban configuration in Canada can match it. And it's connected, deeply connected to our history right from the beginning. It was Waterloo County bylaw number 1 that made adopting that seal with the Lion and the Lamb official back in 1853. And 14 years later, we became Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. And 6 years after the Dominion of Canada was formed, The German community here, famous for their Sängerfests and Turnverein gymnastics, they founded the Concordia Choir and the Concordia Club, and a decade later, in 1883, these same elements formed the Berlin Philharmonic and Orchestral Society, the parent of what is now the Grand Philharmonic Choir and the grandparent of our symphony. Now, the other milestone in the story is the arrival of Raffi Armenian. And the KW Symphony as a professional orchestra goes back 50 years, the same as the region, roughly 50 years, same as the region, same as the city of Cambridge. And of course, the concert hall that was built to serve as its instrument was built just over 40 years ago. So rounding the numbers, we're talking about a 40, 50, 80, 100 for the choir, 140-year legacy, full of ups and downs, but one that has been marked by progress in terms of size, quality, significance, decade after decade. A construction that's so large and so complex and so deeply rooted in our history is not something you just give up and toss into the scrap heap when there's a hitch. It's true, however, that a corporate entity so large, 52 artists earning a living, serving our community, is also vulnerable in the face of unanticipated terms like COVID. The board may have reached an unavoidable conclusion as they were about to begin another season. They looked at the numbers and they just didn't add up. So they shut things down and walked away. But their responsibility to the KWSO was as a legal entity. And as a loyalist, mine is to something that's greater than that and much more durable. Because behind that legal construction, there's something truly wondrous. It's an association formed and sustained deliberately and voluntarily by engaged citizens for purposes that go beyond what any single human being can do. And in this case, we're talking about purposes such as philharmonic and orchestral pursuits, making music. And making music of any kind is a lofty and almost mysterious pursuit. And I know that lofty notions alone won't get us through. I don't agree with Raffi Armenian, as quoted by Joel Rubinoff in the paper back in September, and he blamed our predicament on, and these are his words, bean counters, bureaucrats, and politicians. We're going to need some heroic bean counting to get to where we need to go. Just as we'll need civil servants giving their all. Prudent, provident decision-making from those who were elected us to represent us in democratic bodies like this one.
Thank you,
Oh,
Marinus.
sorry.
Yep, no, that's okay. Appreciate your time tonight. I don't see any questions, so thank you for coming in. Brian Doucette is appearing next in person. Brian, you've got 5 minutes. Thanks for joining us tonight. And I believe there's also a presentation to share with the committee.
There is. I mean, I came here to talk about not going to 30-minute service at the expense of 8 minutes. So I'm sort of, let's use this the best we can. But I do actually want to take some time. So I'm a Canada Research Chair and a planning professor at the University of Waterloo. And I just want to take some time to actually acknowledge the students that are here today and all the work that they've done, the way that the proposal and the amendment came about doesn't just happen out of nowhere. And a lot of these students have put in a lot of advocacy to really get this on the agenda and get this on council's radar. And some of these students are actually in my Plan 100 class and were there this morning, which is fantastic because we talk about this sort of thing in class and the need to not just focus on what's happening in the university, but actually these debates that we talk about are live and real. And I should say too, on the record, as a university professor, I wholeheartedly support missing class to come and participate at an event like this. I fundamentally believe that the ION is the best transit line in Ontario and one of the best in the country. It's not like a bus or a streetcar route, right? A bus route runs every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes. It's not going to show up exactly on time. It might get stuck in traffic, might miss a light. It might be a little bit early. So for a bus, you just kind of show up, right? If we're thinking video games, this is like basic level video games. You turn up whenever, the bus turns up whenever. It's a theoretical time. The ION is different. It is fundamentally different. It is precision transit. Like, I literally set my watch to the second when the clock ticks over because I know that thing is always going to be on time. It's never going to be early. And if it's early, there's actually little signs in the driver's cab that tell them their countdown clocks by the second, that tell them to wait. This is like advanced level video games. And anyone can ride it, right? But because it runs every 10 minutes, and Sam spoke about this need for this clock-face timetable, regular times, every hour, the same interval, it means that you can show up. If it takes you 5 minutes to walk to the station, the train's in 5 minutes. You're going to make it every single time. And I don't think people fully realize, unless you use it regularly, I don't think you actually realize just how excellent this is. We go to the next slide. You can't really see those timetables on the on the screen. It doesn't really matter. This is something that is standard in a lot of places in the world. So this is the old timetable from, I used to live in the Netherlands. 10-minute service, every 10 minutes, on time, right? You set your watch to it. You plan. You know, oh, I'm going to take the 5:17 today. Oh, you know, you plan around it. And so often when we talk about, oh, things are different in Europe, right? Cycling's much better, right? The housing stuff's much better. The public spaces stuff is much better. When it comes to the ION, I think we can legitimately say we are on par, if not better, than a lot of those lines in Europe. Like, this is something to be celebrated and to be championed. And so if the service does improve beyond 10 minutes, as Sam was saying, you go to the 7.5 or the 7 and 8 to keep that clock face intact, to keep that regularity and that simplicity that is part of what makes ION so fantastic. We go to the next slide. We can kind of skip through some of these quickly because we've talked about this, and I think everyone's realized that, you know, a 30-minute service is something that is a service of last resort, right? Something people will use if they have no other option. And we'll see, if we go to the next slide, you know, we've seen lots of pictures of very busy ION trains, right? I took this coming back from a Rangers game with my daughter. And why would we drive? It's a 10-minute walk to get, you know, to get good parking where you're not stuck in traffic. It's a 10-minute walk to the ION station. And it's important to remember, too, that a lot of these evening journeys started earlier in the day. And if you make the service so unattractive in the evenings, you're probably going to kill a lot of that peak ridership as well. If we go to the next slide, I don't know if this is still relevant. Yeah, okay, it is still relevant. But let's also focus, and this has been brought up by a lot of the students here today, let's also focus on getting those bus times down from 30 to 15 minutes, right? That should be a priority. If we had 15 minutes base service everywhere across the city, that would transform not just the ION corridor and not just make it easy if you live, work, and play along that corridor, but many more communities around the region and give us a much more equitable transit system that we all deserve. The ION's a fantastic start. It is the best transit line in Ontario. Let's roll that out to some of the bus routes as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And we've got a question from Chair Redmond.
So, Brian, you should be very proud of your students, and I have to tell you that I was comparing your slide deck. Oral presentation, wonderful, but I really liked Rodney's slide deck.
It's
and
fantastic.
I guess my question would be, what did you wear for Halloween?
I didn't wear anything, but a couple years ago, I made a double-decker bus out of one of those Costco cardboard things for my son, and he loved it. So, I mean, I've got my LRT socks on, of course, which I actually won from the region for tweeting some photos years ago before the line opened. So of course I was going to wear those
Anyway,
today.
great presentation, and you should be proud of all your students.
I
It's been
am.
great.
I'm very proud. It's very humbling.
Thank you, Brian. No further questions. Jonathan Lynn, appearing in person. Jonathan, maybe also a student of Brian's, but maybe not. Thank you, Jonathan. You've got 5 minutes.
I was originally like here to speak about like having like 15-minute or better headways at all times on the ION service, and I was originally in support of the amendment, which has very fortunately passed, and I have to thank council for passing this amendment to keep the ION great. So first of all, I'm actually going to talk about like how much like I like the ION. It's a great transit service. You know, it's amazing and it's very important to us students at the University of Waterloo. Like many people, they use the ION and other transit services on a day-to-day basis. It's not just a 9 to 5, you like get up in the morning, you go to your job and you come back at 5, 6 p.m. home. You also use it for like other different types of trips. Like recently, like I went to Shoppers Drug Mart on the ION at like 8 p.m. And if service was cut, if the amendment was not passed, then maybe I might have not gone. Maybe I might have like delayed it to the next day, maybe when service would be more frequent during the middle of the day. It would definitely like limit like a lot of the mobility that like people have, especially people who don't own a car. And another thing I'd want to say is that like I want to give like a warning for like if just say like if like the region no longer like want to support good transit. Like I'm happy that we are supporting great transit, but like if like we don't continue to keep this up, we don't continue to keep up the amazing effort that we are doing, I'm afraid that like transit may go into what you call a death spiral. Now this is a lose-lose situation where service is cut to match demand, which in turn leads to less riders due to inadequate service, which leads to further cuts that drive away riders even more. Very few people, as has been mentioned by other delegates, will willingly subject themselves to these services that only come every 30, 40 minutes. And the people who don't have access to a car, who need to rely on transit, no matter what, will have to bear the brunt of these consequences. And now I want to get into multiple separate proposals that I have that the city can implement to make transit even better than it is now. The first thing I definitely want to touch on is increasing ION service beyond like what already exists. I know that Sam mentioned 7.5-minute headways. We definitely need to do that during the peak. And I'd also say that even eventually increasing off-peak service to every 10 minutes would be worthwhile in the future because Waterloo's growing and GRT's ridership has exploded a lot in recent years. And in doing that, we're definitely able to keep up with ridership because like when I was going on the ION in the evening, 9 p.m., the train was still packed. I had to stand. And if you're going to reduce service in this type of situation, then you're definitely going to get less people on transit. Now, I don't have much time left, but I want to bring up another issue which has not been brought up by any other delegate thus far, is the use of the EasyGo Smart Card and how inconvenient that is for like a lot of people. So I'm originally from the GTA. I come here on Go Transit whenever I'm going to and from Toronto and I use a Presto card. Now, because I can't use a Presto card in Kitchener-Waterloo and because the Shoppers Drug Marts in Kitchener-Waterloo do not support Presto cards, it has been very frustrating for me to have to switch between fair payment systems, and it really just discourages people from even like discovering the transit system, especially if they're coming from other regions, such as the GTA. I definitely would recommend council to look into allowing accepting Presto cards onto the GRT system, and maybe partnering with Shoppers Drug Marts to allow Presto card to be refilled at any of the locations, just to make it a lot easier for people to pay for their bus or train. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate your time. I don't see any questions. Lori Mark of Kitchener, we have you up next. Lori? Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us, Lori. You've got 5 minutes.
Good evening, Regional Council members. My name is Lori Mark, and I live very close to King Street, where the region placed a shelter in September 22. You may recognize my name, as I'm the author of the email you receive weekly, What Happened in My Neighborhood This Week. I'm not a public speaker, nor am I an expert on homelessness. Homelessness is such a large issue with so many complexities at every corner. I've been struggling to understand what is being proposed in the budget to support homelessness via the YouTube meeting councils. I find the budget to be extremely large and very high level. Firstly, I believe everyone should have shelter, food, access to resources, and programs to help them. All of these people are someone's brother, sister, friend, son, or daughter. It is extremely difficult at times when you live near a shelter to remember that. I would ask that there are sufficient funds in the budget to support shelter, mental health, and addiction needs of the homeless. This would help them significantly, and I believe it would contribute to making peaceful coexistence within the neighborhoods they reside in more successful. This type of support would hopefully reduce the draw on our emergency services. At the King Street shelter alone, I see police, ambulance, fire trucks almost daily, if not multiple times in a day. I would ask that the budget focus on preventing homelessness and creating more affordable housing quicker. A wait list of 7 to 8 years for affordable housing is not acceptable and provides no hope for anyone. I would ask that the budget support smaller shelters for up to 50 persons. The King Street shelter is 100 people and does not appear to be manageable, creating many problems to the exterior areas of the shelter. Perhaps the budget could support 2 permanent locations for their move in August of 2024. I would ask that the budget support the funds to create a better process prior to moving a homeless facility into a neighborhood. The process should include community consultation, education on what to expect, and regular communication. My neighborhood was left to navigate this on their own, and we continue to struggle to manage this. I would ask that the budget support funds to have a central contact for each homeless facility who is accountable to respond in a timely manner to concerns that are raised by the homeless facility or the neighbors. Without this, peaceful coexistence will never exist. I would ask that the budget support security as a last resort. It is needed for the residents of each homeless facility and or the surrounding area. I cannot express how important it is to ensure that the neighborhood and the shelter residents feel safe. No one should have to feel vulnerable, and everyone deserves to feel safe, whether you are living inside or outside the shelter. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Chair Redmond for a question.
Laura, I just want to thank you very much for this thoughtful presentation and coming with solutions and not just issues that you have because there's a shelter in your neighborhood. Thank you very much for taking this approach.
Thank you for listening.
Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Lori, for coming in. You know, you and I have had several discussions and have been through this, and I have relayed some of these suggestions on to Commissioner Sweeney, and I'm hoping that the memo I had sent to him I'll get some feedback on at some point to deal with some of these issues and concerns. Just wanted to check, will you be at the public meeting on December 6th?
I will.
Okay, well, we'll see you there. Thank you for coming in. We've got lots of work to do here.
Councillor Salonen.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Lori. I know you said at the start you're not a public speaker, but you're doing a really great job. And you're a great advocate for your community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lori, for coming in tonight. Appreciate that and being patient to wade through the list. Next, we have David Scott of Cambridge. David is appearing in person. David, you got 5 minutes. Thanks for joining us tonight.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. That's the green one, okay. On behalf of the symphony, but I also point out that I live in Cambridge, and it's been pointed out to me by several people tonight that I'm the only person who is coming tonight to make a delegation from Cambridge. I don't know what to read into that. For more than 30 years, my wife, Marilyn, and I have been supporters in all the ways that one can be without sitting in with the musicians. And now I am here to ask you to take very seriously the future of this valuable fixture in the community. From the perspective of regional council, that means much more than shrugging about the bankruptcy after more than 75 years of existence and saying that's too bad. We cannot afford to lose this valuable reservoir of talent and success. The arts in this region are very important. I underline that. In Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge, and all 4 townships, as well as further afield. I can say this from experience, having been the inaugural chair of the Region of Waterloo Arts Fund and as chair of the Cambridge Library Board. It's not just money, as important as such budgets are. It's also an investment in the texture and well-being of the community. I know or hope that council recognizes and remembers this when the time comes to ante up support. A lot of us did just that when the shocking news came that the KWS was closing up. Doubtless, we will probably do more financially, as may be and will be necessary. But this symphony is a public utility and requires public support. We cannot let it drift away. We must do all we can, and that's a faint hope on my part, but we will. I won't reiterate what others have said. I value your time and attention, and I appreciate that these talented musicians, what they bring to the stage, as I think you do. Let us remember that the center in the square essentially exists because this symphony was created. And let's remember what that means to so many people. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. David, thank you for coming. And I think it's obvious tonight why there's only one, well, you and Marilyn, for people here from Cambridge, we don't have the Ion. But I always, another question is, can you talk about what the symphony means to people in Cambridge?
Well, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I think there's an enormous following of the symphony in Cambridge. For instance, my wife and I go to the Baroque concerts at Central Presbyterian Church, and it's almost always full.
Yes.
There is an appetite for this kind of service in the community.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dave, thanks very much for coming up and representing our community. My question really is, and I come back to what I said to a former delegation, you know, I quite support the arts throughout the region and in Cambridge, but I need a starting point for the KW Symphony. I'd like to know what's happened so it doesn't happen again. And I think we need to know in the future, when you do come back, what the organization is and what the future is going to unfold to make the symphony work again.
Well, Doug, from your lips to God's ear, essentially, we would all like to know what the full story is about what happened at the board of directors and in the those few days when between a Sunday and a Thursday, suddenly this gem disappeared.
Okay.
And we want to know why. And some of us are working pretty hard to figure out why.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Hadi Faisal from Waterloo is up next. And you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chair and Regional Council. So, my name is Hadi, and I'm a first-year civil engineering student at the University of Waterloo. And in August of 2023, I also founded a transit advocacy group called More Transit Southern Ontario to advocate for making transit better in the Greater Toronto Region and surrounding areas. So originally, my plan was to advocate against cutting ION service to 30 minutes in the off-peak period, but I'm happy to hear that thanks to Councillor James and advocacy from residents and alike, that this is no longer happening and service is still getting increased, so it's still a benefit. So I just wanted to talk about why I think ION is so great. So I grew up in Toronto. I lived there for roughly 8 years, and I lived on a streetcar line. So I have experience taking that, and I wanted to compare that to the ION. So the ION is great because it has things like level boarding, which is better than stepping into a lane of traffic and stepping up like I have to do on the TTC. And it has off-board fare payment, which means riders aren't tapping on their vehicles. That slows down boarding. And there's also strong transit signal priority, which means ION hardly ever gets stuck at lights. It's incredibly reliable. So today, actually, I knew exactly what time I had to leave my apartment to get to the station just when the train is arriving, which saves me time. So ION is great, and I wanted to talk about why we should have transit that's reliable for buses as well, because ION is great, and a lot of people take it. It's the flagship transit route of this region, but according to September 2023 ridership, it only accounts for 20 to 25% of GRT's total ridership, which means the rest of the total is on buses, which don't have the nice features that ION has. So I want to advocate for more service hours. I think the 45,000 proposed for service increases is not enough, and we need more, because every time I walk by and I see a bus, it's always crowded. I see people getting left behind at buses. So yeah, having frequency as freedom. So last Thursday, I attended the Kitchener by-election housing forum, and I wouldn't have gone to that event if the transit was every 20 or 30 minutes when the event finished. So on screen, there was a picture over there. It was a picture of the ION coming back. There were 60 people at 9 p.m. on the train, So there's obviously the demand there, so we shouldn't be cutting off-peak service to increase service on peak. And I think that I understand the staff's goals of cutting service in the off-peak periods to increase service on peak because the trains during the peak periods are really busy, but we need to have the funding and budget so that we can have both reliable service in the off-peak periods and enough capacity and service during the peak periods. So I also wanted to raise my support for increasing the transfer time from 90 to 120 minutes and introducing a group pass for $12 because traveling as a group on transit can be really expensive. So I think that's a really good thing to have. So people traveling on groups can take transit. And I think that there should be a way to buy that online as opposed to just in GRT offices, similar to how Go has their weekend pass that a lot of people buy to travel on Go Transit during weekends. So another thing I wanted to advocate for was free transit for kids under 12. So a lot of people have to take their kids on errands, and I don't think that it's fair that the children should also have to pay for their fares. So most transit agencies across the GTA, they have this policy. So Go Transit, Durham Region Transit, the TTC, they all have free transit for kids under 12s, and I think we should do that too. So thank you everyone for your time, and I hope to work with all of you to make GRT better. Thank you.
Thanks, Hadi, for your time tonight and your presentation. Well, last but not least, we've got Artem from Woolwich. Artem, thank you for your patience tonight.
It's okay. Thank you for having me. I registered really late. Mr. Chair, dear councillors, I'm a new resident in Waterloo region. I moved here from Peel, where I have been resident for 9 years. Since allotted 5 minutes for my speech is not enough to go over 174 pages long proposed budget, I will raise only 3 fundamental topics. First topic, tax increase, rate and speed. It's public knowledge that in the past, the region of Waterloo increased tax rate every year. From my layman's point of view, I recognize 2 major components in the effective tax rate: direct tax increase and tax increase due to property price change. So far, property prices kept increasing, thus households are double charged for the same value they receive from the region. It is straight math to calculate compound rate interest increase. In just 7 years, from 2017 to 2023, property tax has risen by at least 47%, depending on municipality of our region. So my question is, what is the ultimate goal for the tax rate? When we will pay enough taxes to support all the services we need? Second topic, tax rate compared to other regions and countries. For 2024, the city of Brampton and Peel region proposed 4.5% rate increase. Historical increases have been always lower in Peel than in Waterloo. In the USA, state taxes agreed to reduce the property tax for 2023 by 40%. That's 40. Even before this decrease, the average tax amount was about the same as for an average property in the region of Waterloo. Keep in mind that taxes also does not have any income tax. Question number 2. What did region of Waterloo staff do to learn from other regions of Ontario or countries about how to make budget and how to run region more efficiently? Third topic, tax money usage efficiency. During my residency in Peel, City of Brampton built new fire stations, added more paramedics, opened 2 new huge parks. Third park is being in development right now. The region is building LRT system while maintaining lower tax rates. On the November 1st council meeting, Greg Dyer, Commissioner Corporate Services Chief Financial Officer, in response to the presentation of John Violet, Chair and CEO of Property Taxpayers Alliance, noted that staffing differences between the region of Waterloo and other regions shown in the presentation is likely due to other regions either not providing public transit or contracting out the service. Last time I checked, Brampton Transit is publicly owned property, just like Grand River Transit. So the staffing difference question between Waterloo and Peel regions is still non-answered. So question number 3, Please explain the staffing difference and why the region requires more employees again. To conclude, Bank of Canada, in justification for the decision to increase policy rate, stated that prices in Canada are going up too fast, economy is doing too well, and job market is too active, and that BOC wants residents to spend less on goods and services and more on repaying their debts. At the same time, Region Waterloo wants to raise taxes again, hire more employees, and as such, it is promoting further inflation. I'm sorry. I truly believe that not 95%, but 100% of people must work if they're physically capable of doing it. But effectively, service expansion and tax increase in Waterloo is opposite to what BOC requested to cool down economy, not mentioning the burden of overtaxing the residents. It would be nice to have alignment between BOC and local government. Bottom line, given all aforementioned disproportional raises during previous years and BOC directions, what do you think the appropriate tax rate should be? Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the presentation. I don't have any questions, Artem. Appreciate your patience tonight. I do not have any remaining delegations. So again, all correspondence received by the Regional Clerk's Office regarding the strategic plan and budget have been compiled and included on this addendum agenda for Council's consideration. Any correspondence received after the addendum agenda was released yesterday will be sent to Council and included in the next strategic planning and budget meeting agenda. I also want to thank all the residents that have emailed Council directly with their perspectives on today's agenda. As always, there are several ways to share your views with Council: emailing or visiting the Engage Waterloo Region website. We've received written submissions for information with regards to communications. Is there any other business? That being said, we will now start a vote to adjourn the strategic planning and budget input meeting. Is there a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor James. Please use eScribe. Oh, token. And that is carried. Thank you, everyone.